Yellow hand, feel free to speak up at any time. For anybody who's not used to the procedure of a work session, this is a work session, so it's not a regular business meeting of the Billings City Council. It's an opportunity for general discussion, a little more informal. We don't make formal binding decisions at our work sessions, except perhaps to give some direction to staff. Mostly an opportunity just to learn and to compare notes and have, as I said, general discussion. So there is a copy of the agenda on the back, that cart. We just have two items on our agenda tonight, our senior services update and then our city-owned properties, specifically discussion of the Moss Mansion, the ABT, the Depot, and the Babcock. Before we get into that, though, I'll just ask Chris whether he has anything for us before we go to public comment.
Yes, Mayor, I do real briefly here. So two things. One is this afternoon at precisely 12:44, just looking in your inboxes, you got a thorough a little over 2-page written update on the utility billing scenario. So you've got all that detail there, an update relative to the audit. There's going to be a meeting tomorrow. Councilmember Rupsis and Councilmember Owen are going to participate in relative to the pre-work we're doing to get the contract drafted and the scope in that contract. That scope will be shared with all of you to give feedback on before it's signed. But we do expect, hopefully by the end of this week or no later than early next week, to have selected somebody to do that third-party independent analysis of the system to learn if there's anything we're missing here, as well as hopefully to provide our customers with confidence that the accuracy of the billing system. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is certainly a little heavier at heart. I will acknowledge I didn't realize this until I think it might have been late last week or early this week. If any of you caught, there was a Q2 story back on the 15th. Brad and Carrie Wright, he's an employee of ours in our Parks Division. And Brad's family, he lost 11 members of his family, his mom and his dad, aunts, uncles, others. And so I got to touch base with Brad today and just asked for prayers for him and his family. He's heading back later this week for the funerals. But I'm unfathomable, right? Lose 11 family members in the floods. They live just about 20 miles outside of Asheville, North Carolina. And he just moved from there to here about 10 months ago. So he, his wife, his 2 daughters, and his mother-in-law are all here in Billings. So trying to find out if there's some information where we can help the families other than, I've got a Venmo account, but that's not the kind of thing you go sharing, publicly, but trying to figure out how folks, if they want to donate and help them. They've been doing a number of things back there outside of Asheville to help that scenario. So just wanted to share that with you. I did not realize Brad and his wife was one of our own employees here till just a few days ago. So wanted to share that with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And we certainly encourage the community to reach out and help that family in any way they can. When you do get more information, it'll be posted someplace. Where should they look?
Yes, we'll push out information, use media, and probably our social media websites as a way to just share if there's, there's a number of things that they're doing to volunteer back there and share resources. So we'll share it through that format.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And our prayers do go out to the right family. Our next item up then is just public comment on items either on or not on our agenda tonight. You're welcome to come forward. We just ask that you tell us who your name and address and tell us or keep your comments to 3 minutes. We will have an opportunity for public comment after the presentation on item 1 on senior services and also the city-owned properties. There'll be another opportunity for public comment then, so don't feel that you have to go now. But if you've got to leave the meeting, we don't want you to leave without having had an opportunity. Or if you've got something that's not on our agenda tonight, feel free to raise that at this point. If anybody would like to come forward, please do. Before we move into item number 1, is there any public comment at this point? Seeing nobody jumping up, we'll close the public comment period and move into our first item, which is our update on senior services at the Parks and Rec office. Parks Director Mike Pigg. Mike.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Much like the presentation a couple of weeks ago from the recreation side, I have Jennifer Brown here. She is our senior wellness specialist for the Parks Department, and she's got an update on all the great things that she's doing down there. So here's Jennifer.
I can actually see over this. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for hearing us today on our updates with the senior services. Like Mike Pigg said, I am the Recreation and Wellness Specialist for senior services here in Billings. I'm dedicated to adults 55 and older. And I have been with the city for now 5 years full-time, and I was 2 years an instructor before that. And I also did my practicum program through the city and created a program. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about the different services that we have as they're pulling up our presentation here. You can see the big picture there. That is one of our Tai Chi classes. Tai Chi is actually being brought by, you can see the guy way on the, far away from everyone else. His name is Mark, and he is an RN that comes and does it for free in our center. He started last year a beginner for Tai Chi, and that's one of our biggest classes for free. And then we have the more advanced one, really focuses on balance and keeping seniors upright, really good with agility and strength. Is that going to go? Next slide. And our focus is to help seniors age well. As you can see at the top, we have ranges of different types of activities, either from the seated position or the standing position. A lot of our seated classes came when I first started there. I saw that there were a lot of seniors that were not even appropriate to stand upright and do an exercise class. But I felt that we could provide great strength training, great balance training, right from the comfort of their chair. Our seated fitness class at the top is one called Sit and Get Fit. And that one is a class that we tried to tailor around doing it around a meal time so that seniors were able to come in, do an exercise class for 30 minutes, and then also go to their games. Because we had a lot of seniors that were coming to games for socialization, which is fantastic, but we also wanted to give them the opportunity to stay fit and get stronger. And then we've got the classes on the bottom there that are upright and they're doing balance from the standing position. And a lot of these seniors, you think that you can't, get stronger as you age, you can. And we've been seeing that. They're using heavier weights, they're getting better on their balance, and we're seeing, truly how amazing they can still get stronger as they age. You can go to the next one. And this is our staff. We have 3 dedicated staff, myself, and then Kaylee, who is our office manager, and she is also our volunteer coordinator. She does an amazing job. And Dwayne, who is our maintenance manager, and he keeps the place running. We have a schedule that goes like this all day long. I have 4 different rooms, including the big main room, as well as our side rooms that we're turning over on quite a quick basis. And so he helps us keep that up, as well as for our celebrations. You can move to the next one. And who will you see at the senior center? You're going to see 12 full-time staff at this point. Sorry, my eyes are getting caught in my hair. 12 full-time staff. We have that part of the Parks and Recreation staff are in there, as well as our full-time staff. We also have, on our side, part of that is the 3 full-time staff for the Community and Senior Center. We have 10 seasonal or 10 seasonal recreation staff that are fitness instructors. They do both on-site and off-site. They will go and see, we have classes that, a couple classes throughout the community with our partnership with the Adult Resource Alliance. We also have 15 volunteers, and we see about 80 to 120 seniors every single day between all of our programming. You can go to the next one. And The overall classes and programs that we focus on are recreation, wellness programming, enrichment, games, and services and volunteer opportunities. This is our pinnacle. After COVID, during COVID, we were able to continue fitness classes. With the Department of Health, they allowed us to do that. But games and stuff stopped. And for about a year and a half, it took us, when they started allowing us to do games and do more of those intimate activities, it took us a while to get more seniors back in. But we're seeing a lot of seniors. I think we have 34 seniors in that picture. Some of them you can't see because it's so wide. That's our pinnacle group. And so sometimes it's just being able to get them out of their house and have a community among their peers. We can go to the next slide. And then we also focus on the 6 dimensions of wellness, and we touch on every single one of them. And this class here, as you can see, that is our Strong and Fit. Not everyone is represented there. We have 35 women that come in Monday, Wednesday, and Friday to Strong and Fit. They've been coming here for over a decade for most of them. I actually had to close off the class because we're not going to have someone get pushed out of a fitness class they've been going to for 10 years. So we opened up more classes so that we can get more people in there. But these women, it's not even just about the fitness, it's about the community that they get. Group fitness, I've been a group fitness instructor for over 15 years, and group fitness really gets people in, and it's more about the community and the community among their peers. And so these ladies will dress up for holidays. They sing, their birthday songs to each other. If someone's not showing up, they are like, "Where are you?" And they have really become a community. Our other classes have done that as well. So it's been amazing to see how they have grown and blossomed throughout that. So we can go to the next one. As you can see, these are all the fitness classes I have represented there. We have, again, anywhere from standing, strength training, all the way to a seated class. We are also going to be introducing a new intergenerational class called Zumbini. It's an early childhood development. It's where you pair a 0 to 4-year-old with a caregiver. And we're really focusing on trying to get in grandparents because grandparents are taking care of their grandchildren. And we're going to be working on that and starting that here in January. And we're really excited for that. We've got one of our instructors who was a former preschool teacher who we're going to get trained. I'm trained in it, but I can't sing. So they sing and dance and do all this stuff. But I also try to get as many of our instructors so that they are teaching the classes and I'm not teaching all of them. One of our most well-received, biggest launches is the cardio line dancing. As you can see up there, that just started this fall. That started out of one of our instructors saying her mother goes to it down in Arizona when she snowbirds, and she asked if she could start it. And they have saw amazing turnout for that. I even went to the Adult Resource Alliance. We went to our quarterly meeting, and Erica, who is the executive director, said she was at lunch the other day and people were raving about the class at Avenue D. So it's great to hear that they're talking about this outside of the senior center. We also have, again, we have probably quadrupled our seated classes just to help seniors, especially after COVID. They were going from being seated all the time because they were in their home, and they came in and we had more weak seniors. And so we have chair-based classes in the Heights, as well as on the West End and at our senior center. The senior center has most of them. We have a little bit of time in each of those buildings to program, but it's allowing us to get more seniors throughout the community active. So that has been a great one too. We can go to, and we also have I looked over our programming for the last 5 years, and we have increased programming by 200% for all of our activities as far as fitness and wellness. We can go to the next slide. We started adding in more enrichment classes. We have a beginner drumming. We have a water class and some oil painting class. One of our biggest ones is the beginner Bob Ross. style oil painting. It is every other week, and it's a really good learning and enrichment. And those pictures that he has there, most of those seniors have never painted before, and they were absolutely incredible. And so it's I think now maxed out every single time. So it's every other Monday. They actually just did it today, and their paintings looked amazing. And we're getting a mix of men and women in there. So we have a lot of, it's kind of like sip and paint without the sip, unless they want to go to Tiny's. So it's been a great addition to our programming. We can go to the next slide. We also have educational classes. I started the Discovering Nutrition back during my practicum when I started here 5 years ago. It was based a little bit off of what I did in WIC, which is doing a positive relationship with food. As you can see in the back there, we have 2 nursing students. They come in and do the classes with us. But we do a different type of recipe every week. It's not really a cooking class. It's more like, come and taste class. And we have a lot of fun. It's a lot of community, and we just have a blast. We started Intro to Diabetes, myself and Richard. He is a nurse clinician that does foot care, and he came to me about starting a class about teaching the basics about diabetes, because a lot of his clients that were coming in didn't know even some of the basic things. And so we started that this summer, and we've had, I think, about 15 people go through. We're doing them in 3-week sessions, about 4 times a year, and we'll be having more of those coming up. We're trying to, do a lot more education. We also have an Intro to Technology class coming out. I have someone in the community who reached out to me and is wanting to do classes for seniors for free, and he's going to come to the senior center and do those. And so we're really excited about that. Next month, it will be safety on the internet. So he's going to be teaching that. So we can go to the next slide. We are also going to be launching more of the fall preventions. Nationally, 1 in 4 seniors fall, and we're even worse in this state, 1 in 3. And that's reported. There are, a lot of unreported. And so falling is absolutely not a part of aging. And there are a lot of factors to it, but one of the biggest one is physical. We can go to the next one. And that's where these fall prevention programs have come in. We got trained with the Department of Health. A total of 4 of us have been trained. 2 of us have been trained for the SAIL class. I'm taking that as Stable and Strong, because SAIL, most people don't know what it is. But it's basically about balance. It's a very introductory class. Our other classes are a little bit more advanced. So it's a great way to get seniors in, get them started. They can do it seated or standing. And then once they get strong enough, we can start to feed them into the other classes. The Stepping On is a more educational-based program, and it focuses on all the factors of falling, whether it's medications, eyesight, footwear, and it's an educational-based one. And we will get community leaders like a pharmacist, a PT or OT in there to come and do the expert kind of portion on that. And we're hoping to launch that here in either November or December, but I had the OT and PT, the person fall through, so I'm working on getting a new one. And so we can go to the next one. And then our partnership with the Adult Resource Alliance. This has been incredible. We have really seen that grow over the last few years. In 2021, we launched our partnership with doing a few classes at their sites. And we have they've been really helping us to also start to fund some more of the SAIL class and the Stepping On to help offset some of those costs. We got an extra $10,000 this year to help with that. And because they see a lot of the work that we're doing as really beneficial to seniors. We've also really increased our celebrations. We're starting to see, like at Christmas and at Thanksgiving, we have 80 seniors. It's a capped at 80 because otherwise it would be a safety hazard. I think before they used to get up to 250. I don't know how you could have 250 people in that space, but they did. So we try to keep it still safe but fun. We also are continuing to work with them. I went on Friday and I went to their quarterly meeting, board and officer meeting, or staff who is working with seniors, and I spoke with Erica, and we are going to be meeting in a couple weeks to talk about more leveraging of programs and how do we get it out to more seniors within our community, because our community is only growing with seniors, and as the baby boomers come up, they're going to be needing more programs to keep them strong and stable in their own home. They also work with us to provide, we are a meal site Monday through Friday, and we do meals from 11:45 till noon to serve, and then they eat there. We have seen an increase of about 23% in that in the last year, and I would say it's probably because food is so expensive. You cannot get the type of meal that they provide for $5. I mean, you go to Hardee's and it's like $15 for a burger with lettuce. And so I think we're starting to see a lot of seniors see the benefit, and they're coming out because they just can't afford it. And so this is a great and essential service for them. We can go to the next one. And then our fun and games, I call it, we have still continued to do programming for games as seniors want them. We will continue to add them. We have bingo, we have pinochle, we have hand and foot, we have a dominoes group that comes in and they meet as well. They're not listed, but they're a private group. We also have a women's Bible study that comes on Monday. And we also have other clubs, and if someone wants to come in, they will, and approach us with that. If we have room, we will accommodate them, or we will find them room. And so our games altogether, I think, have increased probably anywhere from about 25 to about 50% for the participation. And that's great because they're getting out and they're socializing with peers. We can go to the next one. And then we partner with the Yellowstone Genealogy Forum. They lost their space at the library, and they contacted us about moving their resources over with us and partnering with us to do some programming. So they moved a portion of their research over with us. Of course, our building is still not that big. We probably couldn't house everything, so they did outsource some of it. But they have a volunteer that is there Monday through Friday from 1 to 3. And they're helping seniors and the community with research. And they also have volunteers. And we're going to continue to program with them as well. We go to the next one. And then just a little kind of tie up with this, our aging population, we are the oldest state this side of the Mississippi. And so we are aging at a faster rate. We have resources in Billings that people are coming to for. We have the 2 hospitals. So continuing to work on programming to help seniors stay active and fit is our goal, and to help them stay, strong at home. I was at the Governor's Conference on Aging, and Mayor Cole had a great presentation and talked about some really grim statistics. We are one of the highest suicide rates in the United States. We are the 5th altogether for all ages, and seniors as well. And the men are the highest rate. And so about a 7 to 10 ratio on that. So for every 7, there's only 1 female that commits suicide, and a lot of that has to do with loneliness. And so it's super important that we're continuing to add and provide programming to get men out. And so we're really working on that. I've seen the enrichment classes, the Tai Chi classes, the fitness or the games have really been pulling a lot more men out to the community center. They don't tend to do a lot of the group fitness. We do see them in the seated classes, but not so much in the standing classes. So we're going to work to continue on that. And we can move to the next one. These are some of the classes that we have that are intergenerational. You can see, I'm not going to go over them too much, but we have programming that runs for all ages, and they run usually in the evening or during the summer, especially like the Kids in the Kitchen. We do that because we have the kitchen over there. We moved it from North Park because it's just a much more appropriate place to do the cooking class. We can store a lot of the cooking stuff a lot easier than in a park. And so we continue to expand that programming, and we continue to do work on doing intergenerational. We can move to the next one. And these are our wellness programs. We have Richard, he's a foot care clinician, and he comes weekly to do foot care. And if you know anything about podiatry, it's hard to get into a podiatrist here in Billings. I used to work for one, and they spent most of their time clipping when they should have been doing surgeries. And so this he goes around the community and brings the services to them. And he, as a nurse, he can spend a little bit more time, and he's actually caught a few people with wounds and sent them to the hospital before something became catastrophic. We have blood pressure checks. We also have we've had oral checks from the state that have come in, and we recently had the vaccination clinic, and they vaccinated 28 seniors in 1 hour. We can go to the next one. And then we also do student opportunities. I oversee 8 to 12 nursing students over the entire year in the health promotion program. And these are some of our current ones, as well as on the bottom is our OT students. They come in, they get to do classes with our seniors, and then they do a project. And we're gonna continue going forward, creating programs that they can run during their whole semester. So that's going to be what we do going forward. I have 2 OT students I've overseen in the last year. We have a registered dietitian student. It's actually Brad's daughter who will be coming in. And we also have the massage therapy school that comes in. We can go to the next one. And so these are the big things that I saw at the Aging Conference, and I'm telling you this because these are kind of the focuses we're going to focus on in the next year. Brain health is a huge one, scams, living well, and some new regulations around the Older Americans Act. And that has a lot to do with nutrition and the programs that we design, that we're not discriminating or making services hard for them. One of the biggest thing is that I found very interesting is that social engagement, just getting someone socially engaged, decreases your risk for dementia by 50%. Then you start adding in all these other things about engaging the brain, stress, all of that other stuff, it decreases it even more. And so a lot of our programs, when you're thinking about it, a group fitness class, you're coming in, you're being connected, and then you're being physically active, and then if you eat a meal, you know, we're just providing more opportunities for seniors to lower their risk for not only falls, but also for dementia, which is, you know, one of the biggest fears out there. No one wants to age to the point that they don't know who they are or who their family members are. We can go to the next one. And so these are kind of the things that we're looking at: brain health, scams, social connection, learning opportunities, more on the fall prevention, and more on nutrition flexibility. What that means is that they're re-looking at, you have to, for the congregate meal site, the requirement is that they come and sit and eat. But I have seniors that are in there for 3 hours, and then they are being required to sit for another hour to eat. That's just doesn't see, they already got their social engagement. So we will be working with the state on those requirements, trying to break the barrier, because really the goal should be getting the nutrition in their bodies. And then also work on increasing our engagement with volunteers. Any questions?
Very good. Thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate your thorough presentation and your service over there. You obviously know what you're doing, and we're lucky to have you and your staff, so thank you very much. I just want to comment, I appreciate your reference to the problem of suicide amongst our seniors, especially with older men. When you look at your photos, you see they're mostly women, and it's that lack of social engagement for men, plus the fact that they have easy access to guns, and they're not afraid to use them. And so it's a dangerous situation. So anything you can do there is appreciated by our community. Questions? Councilmember Kennedy.
Yes, a couple of them. Do the seniors pay for the fitness programs, the painting, the foot care, all of that?
Yes. Yes, so it's based on, so I run them, most of them are either, so if it's 1 day a week, it's 8 sessions. If it's 2 or 3 days a week, it's 16 sessions, just out of like.
So you charge for those just like you would any other park program?
Yes.
Okay. The question I have is, about 20 years ago, the Council on Aging was in the building. And at that time, that's when the Parks Department decided they were going to take over the building and move the senior programs out of the building. And the senior programs for probably 5, 6, 7 years were wandering the Council on Aging. They changed their name, the Adult Resource Alliance. I'm very happy that you're working with the Adult Resource Alliance, but we passed 2 mill levies in Yellowstone County to fund senior programs. So the question I have, and I don't know if you can answer it or Chris can answer it, is why are we duplicating services, the city and the county offering same services and asking for more taxpayer dollars to run programs when the funding is already in place for the Adult Resource Alliance?
Councilmember Kennedy, Mayor and Council, I don't know that we are duplicating services. You've got more history here, but in the past 6 years, it's not been a conversation that has come up. So that, as well as should any of those 2 mills be funding what we're doing, that's not been a conversation I've been a part of. I don't know.
So I can speak on this. So a part of our funding comes from those mills. About 11%, I believe, comes, offsets our overall budget. And so when we put that into the budget, some of it's to run the mill site. And then some of it is to go after and help with the programming. And so I got an extra $5,000 to help with the increasing needs for the programs and then to pay for the fitness, the exercise equipment. We also, again, utilize and do those programs at the Adult Resource Alliance, because what we found out is we were duplicating that. And I sat down with Mike at the time and we decided that's where our level of expertise is in the fitness and the wellness. And so we partnered with them to bring those to their sites. Plus, we were also sharing a lot of the fitness and wellness instructors. And so now, instead of if someone calls in sick, we can go ahead and send a backup instructor up to the heights, or God forbid, I have to teach. I mean, I've actually at one point taught 13 classes in 1 week when we were launching some of these classes.
No, I'm not trying to downgrade your classes or anything.
No.
I'm coming back to Chris and looking at the dollars and cents. Why are we and the taxpayers in this county paying the 2 mills for senior services, and then the city? We talked about this 20 years ago, and then we talked about it 10 years ago with the Adult Resource Alliance and the city, and said, why are we duplicating services if all senior services are operated under the Adult Resource Alliance? Then if the city is offering recreational programs for the seniors, that's great. But this is the number, Chris, that you have in here. The fiscal effects of the operating budget for the Community Senior Center is $281,917, but it's partially offset by the Adult Resource Allowance. But what you're saying is we have over $200,000 that comes out of the city general fund, correct? If these are park programs, and they're park programs that are being charged to seniors to do those park programs, all of that money should be coming out of the park budget. And the other thing is, if we're doing administrative services for seniors out of the program here, which I think you do a great job, I'm not saying anything against that, but why isn't that being run out of the Adult Resource Alliance?
Councilmember Kennedy, Mayor and Council, happy to follow up on your questions. As I said, over these past 6 years, it's not been a topic of conversation that I've been a part of, but I'm happy to work with Director Pigg and find out whatever was the case 20 years ago and 10 years ago, and more importantly now, is there duplication going on and or funding that should be coming out of those 2 mills, or that we should stop providing services on because someone else, the county, is providing them? But again, this is the first I've heard of them providing services in competition with what's being provided at the senior center.
Chris, just to follow up on what you just said, you said this hasn't been a problem and you haven't heard anything on it. Well, We just heard 2 meetings ago that instead of going with the lower mill levy, the staff recommendation was going to the higher mill levy for $275,000 of extra money. So the question I have for you is, if you have an opportunity to have the senior program running these and saving the general fund $200,000, why wouldn't you look into that?
Happy to look into that.
Councilor Neese.
Here we go. Thank you, Councilmember Joy. Quick question. You mentioned that they pay for fees, so I know in the Recs program, the Parks Department charges fees for the services, but often doesn't cover the cost. So can you explain when you charge them for fees, what is the cost? What are these fees? How are they recouping the cost of the service?
So are you, sorry, I didn't, are you asking the amount we charge for class?
Not a necessary amount per class, but does it cover your expenses?
Oh, yeah, we cover all, we aim to cover all costs of running the classes, and so it's self-sustaining. There are a few classes we did get some funds on, and we have worked with the Alliance that have brought it down, like this, the fall prevention ones. In the community, there are a few people who provide them for free, but a lot of times if you provide anything for free, value goes down and people don't show up. And so we do a small amount of fee on that, and those are just starting, and it's only a couple classes. The rest of them, what we aim for is to cover the direct costs of all programming.
So you're not covering the operational costs or the facility cost and ongoing maintenance?
We try to do some of the off, but there would, you'd have to have a lot of classes and they would be very expensive if you were to offset all the direct or indirect costs.
Okay, and then you mentioned in your presentation you had a 200% increase, but what were the numbers? What number of people did you have an increase from what to
I
what?
would have to pull that out, and so the number of programs offered, I'm not actually, I don't have quite the number yet, and I calculate that at the end of the year of the overall percentage of seniors that are in those programs. We pull all those numbers in December, and so I will be pulling those. I do try to run them throughout the year. We just got done with our rec booklet, and so I'm finishing up getting that data into our data entry system, so we can go ahead and get that information for you. But that 200% was the actual offerings of the classes.
Okay, so you're expanding the programs
Yeah.
200%, not necessarily the number of people.
Well, yeah, those are not the number of people, but I can definitely get you that number.
Okay, and then you mentioned you got 11 mills from 11% from your budget from the county mills. Do you know what percentage of that represents the county mill levy?
I'm not quite sure. So we get funding. I go every year to the Adult Resource Alliance and I request the funding. It's gone up over time. And we've, for the last 5 years, had $40,000 and we now are at $50,000. As far as how they allocate that, I'm not quite sure. That all goes directly through the Adult Resource Alliance. And so we would have to ask them.
Okay, and then do you track your attendance by city and county residents? And if so, do you know what percentage are city and what percentage?
Yes, so we did run those numbers, and this is for all services. It's really hard to just take out seniors, but it's 2.2%, and we do charge more. It's about, because our programs are at a smaller fee, it's like $30 to $40, it's about 25% more for them to attend those classes.
Okay, so county residents pay 25% more.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very good. Councilmember Boyette.
Maybe this would be for Mike. And we visited a little bit before the meeting, but I guess shame on me for not asking the questions a couple of years ago. But when I talked to the architects and said I'd like to have the Parks Department move from their present building into the Stillwater building, which is now the new City Hall, I assumed all your people were coming, but apparently only half or a third are coming over to the new city hall. Is that correct?
Councilmember Boyette, that is correct. So the building, the space that is designed for us does not have enough room for all of my staff to move over, nor does it have enough room for like our interns and any of that. There's not additional room for that, no.
Okay, so looking backwards a couple of years, would it have been better for us to leave you where you were at and then save this room that you're moving into for other departments?
Councilmember Boyette, once again, yeah, I would have suggested that, yes, if I would have been asked.
Okay. How about right now? Would you suggest that?
The space we're in currently operates just fine. We function out of there just perfectly. There are some advantages to having at least, the staff that can move over, that makes it to where it's easier for me to collaborate with other departments and things like that. But we do that now anyways through, Zoom calls or emails or even just phone calls. So, but it would be a little easier to get together, so.
Okay, then I guess I got two more questions.
Go ahead.
The other one, it says that the remaining 196,000 comes out of the general fund. When I saw that, I said, well, why didn't it come out of the parks budget rather than the general fund?
Yes.
Can you explain that?
I can, Councilmember Boyette. So Parks basically is funded out of the general fund. And so when I wrote that memo, I just said general fund. I should have said Parks.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Then the last question is, I've dealt for years and years with the Adult Resource Alliance. They have a building in the Heights. They have a building on the West End. I thought, geez, it would be great. That's why I asked for this presentation. It'd be great for them to take over this facility downtown rather than the city. Can you give me your 2 cents on that?
Yeah, so a lot of the services that they provide are office-based services. They have a lot more staff. They would way overfill that facility. And they concentrate on those senior services like that they're better at. They have asked us to take over those wellness classes that they weren't operating very well and were poorly attended. And they asked us to take those over because Jen and her staff do such a great job. So we've kind of offered all of those classes that we can in those other facilities for them and then brought more of their people to our location too.
Go ahead.
So have you talked to them at all about taking it over? At our conversation, you said they didn't want the facility.
Correct. It's too small for what their operation is right now. Yes.
Mike, if I can follow up on that, what is your sense of the Adult Resource Alliance activity level at the other two buildings in the Heights and on Avenue D? My sense when I've been there is they're packed to the gills in there and really don't have enough room in those facilities. If we were to try to shift what happens at the senior center downtown out there, that would be extremely difficult. Plus, it would be that much more travel time. But that's just my opinion or my tentative impression is that, and Jennifer might have a view on that as well. But
Yeah, I'll provide an answer and then we'll get some input from Jennifer. Mayor Cole, what the area that they have is very inadequate for the exercise classes, all of those things that Jennifer does. They provide a lot more of those counseling type services and things like that. Those are what they're hosting in their offices. So when we go out there to help them with like an activity, like a fitness activity, it's a very small number. We're getting 8, 10 people there because the space is just so small. Then our facility actually has that, and you guys might have noticed, has that really nice floor. That floor is specially designed for activities for seniors like that. It's very cushiony on their knees and their joints. The Adult Resource Alliance doesn't have that sort of a facility. So we provide much better, higher quality courses than they do. We provide them there also, but the facility just isn't as nice. Do you have something else, Jen?
Yeah, so if you look at all the senior services in Billings and then our population, we could never actually fit, if every senior came out, you couldn't fit them all. And the senior services over, like Mike said, I can only do about 2 classes on the West End because most of it's the meal site Medicare. We're going to be coming up on the AARP tax season. We actually have to be moved upstairs. Their floors are all carpeted. I have to completely program differently. You cannot do the same class on carpet as you can on our raised wood floor. Those are the most ideal floors for joints, and especially for our instructors who are teaching 3 or 4 classes a day. If we can have them on that floor, it's much better for them as well. And there's only those 2, and then downtown we have the South Park one, and they do mostly games, and they are packed in there as well as what I am hearing. So we want to be getting more seniors out than ever. And so being able to be joint together and work on providing services and programs that will get any kind of senior out, I think is beneficial.
Okay, thank you. Other questions for Jennifer, Mike, or any other staff? Councilmember Boyette?
I'll just beat it to death one more time. Maybe this would be for Kevin. Kevin, at this point in time, you know, I understand that finance has an extra person, or maybe IT has an extra person. Would this be the time before we move into the new building to think about maybe leaving the parks where they're at and having additional space for additional employees? Just, you're the man in charge.
Okay, thanks, Councilmember Boyette, for the question. My answer is the sooner we make that decision, the better, because we have been moving forward with the Parks Department moving over there. But I would say our design allows a lot of flexibility over there. So yes, you know, we could pivot that direction. But I think council was very clear that the Parks Administration was moving over there. So we just need to know what direction council would like to move with that, because I was on the other side of the argument of not moving them over there for quite a lengthy period of time. But yeah, the design's flexible enough, we could use that space and start filling it up.
Okay, thank you. We do, looks like we got other questions. We'll open up for public comment, and then we'll come back to council for any discussion and move on to the next item. Councilmember Kennedy, Councilmember Neese.
Chris, just talking about the budget, as I had 200 and something, but as Councilman Boyette said, 196,000. And according to Mr. Pick, he said that that comes out of the parks budget. So that's out of the parks budget and not the general fund.
Councilmember Kennedy, Mayor and Council, the Parks Department is general fund funded. So is the police department, so is the fire department, so is our main department. So really it's just a semantics of how we state it, in that the property tax levy that funds all park services outside of the park maintenance districts in fees and charges for services, and I hope I don't think I'm missing any big buckets. Anything outside of those things is on that general property tax. So whether, as Mike said, we could have said in the Parks Department budget, but is funded through the property tax of the general fund in the same way that we do for police and fire.
Go ahead.
Just a budget question following up on that. You have parks, you have police, you have fire budgets. As we go forward with the budget and looking at the budget, there's an opportunity for us to go ahead and split those out. They can be under the heading of general, but you have each of those, correct?
In fact, this budget year that we're currently in, we did split out for the first time to try to track similar to where I believe you're thinking about, so that the public and council could more easily see what has been dedicated in the recent past and in this budget for funding of parks.
Just one more follow-up then. So then, when the parks maintenance mill levy went away and they came back into the general fund, dollar for dollar came of what we were levying for the parks maintenance budget. That was dollar for dollar that we had for the parks budget in the general fund.
We did, if I understand your question correctly, we did move what was fully being collected in Park District 1. We dissolved it or stopped charging a Park District 1 fee, and that full budgeted amount slid over to the general fund, and the mill levy was increased to cover that full cost of what was prior being paid out of the Park District 1 assessment.
Thank you. Just one follow-up right here is I appreciate all the senior services. It's very important. We have a lot of seniors in this community, including myself. But the question I have is, do all of your fees for services that you offer those classes pay for the staffing, your 3 staff?
Yes, so it offsets all direct costs for those staff, so we have to at least cover that. And then, you know, with a fitness and wellness class, a lot of times we don't need to upgrade equipment very often. once we get the weights, we get them. And so we'll get special ones. I've got some special funding to add to it because of our increase in funding through the Alliance, as well as through some of our budget requests. But those are not reoccurring. Really, we're looking at, especially with a lot of these, it's the price of the instructor. We do have to pay them at competitive rates. So we have upped them over the years, but they are, we're talking about a few hours a week. So everything should directly cover those costs, other than a few classes that we have put in through the budget and through special requests through the Alliance, as well as through this last budget season, that will cover some of those fall prevention classes. Although some of those classes myself and Kaylee will run, and so that's still kind of some of those indirect costs.
That's commendable. Then Mayor, just one last comment. I would look at what Councilman Boyette is looking at, that we look at keeping the parks back in the building where they're at.
Thank you. Councilmember Bernice?
Thank you, Mayor. Since Councilmember Boyd brought this up, I were there, and I was there when we were talking about this, and it was very clear the council did want the Parks Department to move over to the facility. When I'm looking at, I believe your staff, you had 3 staff in your department, and so of the 22 or so, all of those, in my opinion, should be moving over. And as I understand, Kevin, you may correct me on this, but I understand the Vista area was actually being expanded quite a bit to include more room for vistas. So maybe, I don't understand why this is a very, very large building that was, supposed to meet the city needs for 100 years. And now we're finding out the Parks Department doesn't have enough room to fit in it. And I know that we're getting off topic here, but it is a little disappointing. If you want to reply to that, otherwise then we'll move on to public comment. Thank you.
Yeah, Councilmember Neese, so the direction that I took from council at the time was that we wanted Parks Administration over there, and the recreation specialists were staying at their current location because they do rec programming and stuff out of the senior center and then different areas, and that's where all their equipment is, so it made it more efficient if we did keep the rec specialists and some of those people at the community center and move Parks Administration. So those were the people that were coming over at the time. Otherwise, we could have designed more space on the 4th floor. We have open space there. There could have been other areas, but that's the group that we were bringing over to the new city hall.
Thank you.
And just a reminder, we still have all of the 3rd floor at some point in the future, and you said a portion of the 4th?
Correct.
Okay, so, very good. Let's open up for public comment. If anybody would like to comment on
Your Honor, can I ask a question?
oh, I apologize. Councilmember Shaw.
No worries. I have a question for Director Pig. I just wanted to say, well, first of all, thank you, Jennifer. That was a great presentation. I love hearing about all the programming. Every time I walk in there, there's probably 20 to 30 people. Just this week, or last week, I think I was in there and they were all playing pinochle around tables, so it's really great to see. Mike, I have a question for you about upcoming maintenance on that building. So I know council cut $600,000 from the capital fund for parks this year. If that money doesn't come back next year, are there upcoming things that are going to need to happen at this building that we should be aware of?
So, Councilmember Shaw, the maintenance items that we had to do this last year were all paid for through from the hail damage, from the hailstorms. So the major maintenance, we got a new roof, we got new siding, new paint. So all of that was taken care of. The roof does have some leaking issues, but we're working through those with the contractor. As far as major maintenance, though, I think we've handled all of the big items that were really necessary. There's those day-to-day items as we, get a door button that doesn't work or things like that, but nothing major that I know of that are coming along.
Okay, great. Thanks. I just wanted to follow up on that. I know we're going to move into doing the capital improvement plan, so I wondered if you wanted to flag anything for us. Appreciate it.
Nothing at this time, thanks.
Very good. Thank you. So if anybody would like to comment on item 1, the senior services program, please feel free to come forward. Just ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes and tell us who you are. Any public comment on item number 1? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment period. Council, are you ready to move to item 2, or was there any other discussion on item 1? Councilmember Bernice.
Mayor, I just want to make sure, after public comment, since there's none, I do agree that the programming that is happening here by the city is good. I think it's different, maybe a little different than the Resource Alliance, but I think it still falls within that category. And I agree with Councilmember Kennedy and wonder why we're getting into this direction of that, and would look to see if there's a possibility, if they're interested in merging it. You got a team here of the city who has done really a good job to develop this program, and maybe they need to be working under the Resource Alliance Center instead of the city, and let the Resource Alliance Center, continue to work and use that center if they want. But I don't think anything would need to change in the programming. I just don't think the city would need to actually fund this and operate it and be under the Parks Department. So I agree with Councilmember Kenny in some respects. I don't know if he fully is, if I'm changing what he thought, but I think it should be looked at, and they should be approached to find out if they want to take this whole program over.
Okay. I'll just comment, and I'm open to any new information, obviously, and it is good, but just because there's a funding source in the county doesn't necessarily mean that there's true duplication. The county also has a police department. It's called the sheriff. And we could just get rid of our Billings Police Department, but we're not going to do that because there's a need for it. And the question is whether there's a need that can only be met by the city. I don't know, but my sense is that they're probably not sitting on a lot of extra money at Adult Resource Alliance. But if they are, maybe we could have a further discussion. Any other discussion? Councilmember Kenny?
Mayor, Councilmember Boyette brought up an issue of maybe that the Parks Department just needs to stay in the building where they're at instead of moving them over. I would ask to follow up with Councilman Boyette that we put it on the next business meeting, and we have a vote on that, and that gives pure direction to Kevin.
So Councilmember Kennedy, so I'm clear, I mean, you can give direction to us tonight if that's the direction council wants to go. I don't know if it needs to be at an actual business meeting. I said, Councilmember Kennedy, you could give us direction tonight, council could, on which direction you'd like to head. I don't think it needs to be brought to a business meeting for that.
We cannot do a vote at our work session, so we would have to bring it back to a regular session and have the council give you full direction.
Well, I think we could give direction to council at a work session. So I think what Kevin is saying, we haven't entered into a contract or something that would require formal action. It's something that could be handled at the administrative level if it's really something that the council was committed to. Nod of your head, Kevin? Yes, okay. So we could act on it tonight if you wanted to, or come back at a different work session. That would, in my opinion, be a pretty precipitous change in direction without some sort of analysis of how much sense that makes. But we could, I don't know. Council, how do you want to proceed? Councilmember Joy?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Assistant City Administrator Ifland, I want to ask a little bit about the way that we have built out the City Hall in terms of funding and the cost for space and how they get allocated out to the departments. If council wants to change its mind about this issue, how would that impact? Because each department is paying for their portion of this. How would that impact the City Hall build out? Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for the question, Councilmember Joy. Right now, what we're anticipating is the cost to the Parks Department in the new facility for their square footage of space would be about $58,000 a year. So that's what they're going to have to be charged for those types of facility charges when they move into the new space that's allocated to them at this time.
Go ahead.
So essentially that means that we would have to then find a way to really find the funding to cover those $58,000?
Correct, because where they're currently located, we own the building. I mean, there's cost for them being in that building, but this would be an additional $58,000. Yes.
Councilmember Ripsis?
Thank you, Mayor. Kevin, just on that same note, were there additional build-out costs, or is that, you're talking about the annual rent or monthly rent essentially, but were there build-out costs that we're also absorbing in the budget?
Correct, Councilmember Webster. So we're build-out costs. I could see if we could break those down and, by square footage or something, but no, this would be actual facility charges, again, for whether that be debt service, just like being a tenant in a space.
Just
ahead.
if we don't take any action tonight, do you imagine you guys are going to go have a conversation about whether you should or shouldn't be over there? And maybe make a recommendation to us without us forcing your hand?
Certainly, it's brought some conversation, up that we need to have, yes. But again, I think council was very clear that we wanted to go this direction. So having some more clear direction on where we wanted to head, that's what it would boil down to, because we're moving full steam ahead on finishing out that space for the Parks Department.
All right, thank you.
Okay, let's recognize Councilmember Gulick just because we haven't, and then Councilmember Kennedy and Boyette.
I'm certainly open to, what works best for staff, and you guys know better than we do. So I probably went along with Parks moving over there. Sounds good. It does seem to me that there's some advantage for coordination at the director level, perhaps with other departments, and so that I like that. On the other hand, then that leadership is no longer with their staff too. So there's some pros and cons. I think you guys know better than I certainly do in terms of what's going to work best for Parks Department. So I'm certainly open to that, to some sort of shift.
Okay, Councilmember. Okay, yeah. I recognized Councilmember Kennedy before. Let's go to Councilmember Kennedy and we go to Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you. Since Councilwoman Shaw had brought up the 600,000 and worried about the park budget and money going away, the park budget is paying for the 283,000 over at the park building, even though they received the 50,000 from the Council on Aging or Adult Senior Alliance. That brings it down to about 230. They will still have that cost, plus by moving over, you would have an additional 58,000 coming out of the parks budget. You'd think that this council that's worried about the park budget would look at an additional $58,000 coming out of their budget to put a few of them over in the building. I would have a tough time with that, so I would go forward and leave them right where they're at and at least save the park budget, the 58,000.
Councilmember Shaw, Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you. I guess I wanted to raise a point of order.
I'm sorry, and then Councilmember Dees.
I feel like we're kind of far afield of what was noticed and advertised for this meeting, and I think it's a worthy discussion, but we don't, all this information that Kevin's kind of giving us on the fly, I would like to read that and see it before voting or making a decision on this. So that's what I wanted to say, is that I think we haven't allowed the public, they had no idea we were going to be talking about this, let alone taking action on it. I think we're kind of getting into some gray waters here that I'm uncomfortable with.
Point well taken. We'll try to wrap up here and move some resolution here. Councilmember Nisk.
Yeah, I don't disagree with Kendra on this, but since it's been mentioned, I'm going to bring up because I think the whole idea of we do need more information from Kevin on some of the specifics, but any department that's moving over to the city hall, it's going to be cheaper to stay where they're at than coming over to the city hall. So if we want to work on public work fees, let's not bring public works over to the city hall. Let's not bring all these different departments that we're going to bring to city hall. It's a more expensive building. There's no question about it. And so I think we need to hear from Kevin on additional stuff and get the full council here to have a discussion on this if that's what we want to do. But I think the idea of starting to put the departments back out in the field after the council really purchased that building in the effort to bring the city together under one roof is really defeating the purpose, and we should probably sell the building.
Thank you. Councilmember Boyette, we're going to give you the last word. If there's a motion, I'm going to entertain the motion, but otherwise we'll move on to item 2 after this.
So, Kevin, if 9 people came over, there's like 9 empty seats. Have we thought about what to do with those empty seats or desks over at the Parks Department? Can we lease them? Is there someone else that can fill those holes that are just sitting there then?
So Councilmember Boyette, what I'm kind of hearing is what I'd like to get together with the design team. They know our resource needs, our space allocation that we need, and then what could we do with that space that's currently built out, that's framed up? Is there things that we need to change a little bit to make it more useful, to the city staff and that sort of, and then we can bring some suggestions back to you on that, and then certainly have a conversation with some more knowledge.
I was really asking about the Parks Department. If then people move out, then there's empty spots there.
Correct.
What would we do with those?
Oh, at the current community center, and I think Mike can address that if I'm not mistaken, because we have talked about that.
Councilmember Boyette, yeah, so currently, part of my staff is my recreation staff. They're all housed in one office space, one small cramped office space. And then during the summer, when we bring our interns on or our vistas, they all get housed in that same office also. So at this one point in time this summer, I had 7 people in one 15 by 25 space. We would spread those recreation specialists out, give them their own office, an independent space, and then have plenty of room in that area to house those vistas and interns. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Okay, council, we'll move on to item 2, just a way of summary. There was no clear direction to go in a different direction to staff, but there was, I think, a desire to have more information on this. I heard from Kevin that staff is going to look into that question. Certainly a legitimate question and a valuable discussion. So thank you, and more to come, sounds like. So with that, we'll move on then to item number 2, which is our discussion of city properties, the ABT, the Babcock, Moss Mansion, and the Depot. Chris is going to start us off on that, and then we have representatives from each of those organizations with us tonight, as well as the Downtown Billings Partnership. Chris.
Yes, Mayor and Council, I've got just a couple of slides here that at a very, very high level summarize some of the information you had in your packet. And then I'm going to turn the podium over to some folks from Moss Mansion, then the Alberta Bear Theater, then Billings Depot, and last but not least, Babcock Theater, which on the Babcock side, we've got a presentation that was in your packet. The other comments, I think, are pretty concise and brief. But so in your packet tonight, you saw, and if we could, thank you, Kevin. So council's asked, and this was a really great exercise. In my time here, I hadn't looked and read these leases from years and decades ago, and had the opportunity to sit down with representatives of each of these groups: Moss Mansion, Alberta Bear Theater, Depot, Billings Depot, and Babcock Theater. And bottom line is, and you've had, so I'm not going to repeat them, you've all had the lease agreements for them, and you can see there's some pretty similar language in them, particularly as it relates to what our responsibilities are as a city. I think I can generalize it to say there's some real clarity there, especially with the first 3, that the city is not a financial partner beyond the fact that we hold title, and therefore we've got insurance and a couple of other things like that. So one, you've got those lease agreements and the public's got access to those. They were in the public packet tonight. Secondly, I was reminded and educated on just how much incredible work is being done and has been being done for decades in this community to take care of these public assets. Whatever your opinion is about them, they're all groups of volunteers who've raised, I think in every case, 6 figures, probably all 7 figures or more, to keep these facilities, renovate them, and get them where they stand today. And so maybe this is my bad interpretation, but my last bullet here was just not to misinterpret the request for tax increment financing assistance or grants as some kind of indication of what their financial standing are. These guys, like I said, in the packet, I was able to provide you with some of those projects. And I asked them in very short notice, don't be exhaustive. I'm not looking for years or decades worth of work, but can you let us know the past few years and things that you anticipate coming forward? And you all saw that. And so, actually, maybe before I jump to that last slide, I'm going to leave this one up. And we have got, so later when we circle back, I'll wrap up, I guess, after each of them have an opportunity to speak and hit this last slide. So first, from the Moss Mansion, we got Mike Nelson, Joy Culver, and Allie Turner. All three of them would like to just share for a couple minutes the work that they're doing, and then we're going to turn it over to Jan Dietrich at the ABT Alberta Bear Theater. So, Mike, can I give it over to your group first?
Sure, thank you. Good evening, Mike Nelson, 19 North Broadway, the fabulous Northern Hotel in beautiful downtown Billings, Montana. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. But tonight I'm speaking to you as a member of the board, past chair 3 times for the Billings Preservation Society. That's a group of great folks that runs and operates the Moss Mansion. My involvement, though, goes beyond that because my mother, Bernie, of Bernie's Diner fame, was actually part of the board and the group that brought the Moss Mansion into being. And we're lucky to have Joy Culver here. She was part of that group, too, and she's going to talk to you for a few seconds. The Moss has been a partnership between Billings Preservation Society, the city, who owns a minority stake of it, and the state of Montana, who owns a majority stake of it. You two, the city and the state, are the landlords. And we have an agreement now in its second term. The first was 20 years, I believe, and now the second term is 10, with 2 more renewals, 10 years. The guarantees that we won't ever ask you for a dime. We're tasked with maintaining and operating the House Museum without cost to you guys. As a matter of fact, the city makes about $200 a year off of the Moss Mansion because you charge us for snow removal. So thank you for that, by the way. And we want to talk to somebody about chip and ice later, okay? We're what we like to think of as the soul of Billings. Mr. Moss built a lot of really cool buildings. His name is on the cornerstone of a lot of really cool buildings. He at one time had a number equal to about $500 million of businesses going on in Billings in today's dollars. And he did all that from that beautiful house that was opened in 1903, which was a year before the Northern Hotel. I got to get that in because I have a big mortgage, right? Which was also his deal. Fast forward to the 80s, Billings Preservation Society came out of the Parks District. Where did we hear that tonight? And decided that they should best take over the soul of Billings and make sure that it is remembered as the part of Billings that basically made us what we are today. It's a real museum. The National Geographic put it on the list of top house museums in the country, right next to the Vanderbilt Mansion. It's a real deal. But probably even more important today, it's TripAdvisor's #1 thing to do in Billings. Not jump off the rims, not go to Bernie's Diner, but visit. So that's a real big deal. Remember, tourism in Montana results in a tax cut of $917 to every citizen in the state, and the Moss Mansion is doing its part. So that's exactly the opposite of what this council, I'm sure, is afraid of, is that we were going to cost you money. But we're helping to save everybody money. We bring in kids, or we have from the schools, to teach them about history. We like to tell the school district that we make history cool. That's our mission. We'll bring in architects and architects students. We do things to bring the community together. We have gardens that are done by master gardeners. It's the most beautiful place in downtown Billings, probably the entire city. And we all do that. We do all that without asking you guys for any money. As a matter of fact, this year, our executive director pushed a project through to put in a $700,000 heating system. We didn't ask you for any money. We didn't even ask you for free snow removal. we're contractually obligated not to ask you for money. So we are now coming to you on bended knee to ask you to please don't sell us. The city and the state ownership brings a level of accountability that keeps us from doing the wrong thing. And it makes us remember that this is the people's mansion. It's not the Billings Preservation Society mansion. That's a big part of it. We take what we do seriously. So there you go. That's all I got to say. Unless you want me to say more, I can sing a song.
I don't think so. You've said it very well, Mike.
Thank you.
Councilmember Boyette.
So Mike, can you give us, do you have any history of why the state ends up with a 2/3 and why the city ended up with a third? What was the rationale?
Turns out Ms. Culver helped fund that agreement or form it, so she can tell you every bit of the nuance on that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Joy, did you want to comment?
Good evening. Glad to have a chance to speak with you all tonight. Joy Culver, I live at 3208 Rugby Drive. And it came to pass that I came back to Montana in 1981. And shortly after that time frame as a CPA, I was fortunate enough to meet some people that we don't have with us anymore, but Senia Hart, Carolyn Ennis, and many others, Gail Waller. And as a result, what was happening right around the Moss Mansion at that time, in the late 70s, Granite Tower, 10 stories going up. And that's on North 32nd Street. And then in 1985 or so, here comes on North 31st Street, First Interstate Tower, 20 stories. And just a few blocks to the other side of downtown, the Moss Mansion was coming into public ownership. And the reason I want to stand here is to just refresh in all of our minds the importance of those three and many other things happening in that part of downtown at that time have been so critical to its stabilization and revitalizing what is just another piece of our beautiful city. Oh, if I could just speak to Mike Boyette's question about the percentage ownership. It came to pass that there is east and west in Montana. There still is, there was then too. And the efforts of Tom Tao and John Bollinger to figure out how can we accomplish the acquisition of this property. What came to happen in the legislature at the time was the Daley Mansion in Hamilton also was in the same state of almost ready for public ownership. And the Moss Mansion was in the east, in that same stage. There was inheritance taxes on both sides. And so essentially the forgiveness of inheritance tax, which we don't have here in this state any longer, was the starting point. And then the money that the city of Billings and its people agreed to put into the basket, into the pot of money to match the appraised value of the mansion at that time, was how those percentages came to be.
Very good. Thank you, Joy, and thank you for your service over the years. Okay, Chris, who's next on our?
Next up is Jan Dietrich, sorry, I skipped Ally.
mean,
I'm
Jan
sorry,
is
we're
really
still,
nice,
we're
so.
still talking about the Moss Mansion. I'm sorry, Ally. Ally's
No,
going
you're
to talk
okay.
about Moss for a few more minutes.
I'm Allie Turner. I'm the executive director of the Moss. I feel like Joy and Mike said a lot. So the only thing I want to kind of spew at you is numbers. I feel like a lot of people like to hear numbers so you can kind of see what we're doing in the community. The Moss has been here for over 120 years. But now every year we have over 10,000 hours of volunteer work put in. We have over 8,000 people who visit just for tours, an additional 12,000 who come in for our events. We average about $100,000 worth of preservation work every year. If you take how long we've been a museum and how much money we put in, that's how much we are preserving this house every year with that amount of money. And like Mike said too, we have about 2,000 school kids come in through every year. So we have a lot of positive experiences at the Moss for this community, for people outside this community, and we're a big reason that people come in here. So thank you.
Thank you.
My apologies, Ally. Thank you very much. So we don't have anything else on the Moss. So next up is the Alberta Bear Theater. We've got Executive Director Jan
Dietrich.
Jan, who's going to talk to us. And in your packet, you had, just like the Moss, had some material there. So Jan.
Thank you, Chris, Mayor Cole, and council members for the opportunity to be here tonight. The Moss did a great job. I'm going to tell you, I'm not that prepared because I wasn't really told until I got here that I would probably need to speak, that Chris was going to present. So I'm here to tell you about the Alberta Bear Theater. And in the early 80s, after it was a cinema, the Fox Theater, the city bought the theater and was going to turn it into a parking garage. At that time, our Hughes Agnew, Jim Scott, Ray Hart, Larry Martin, they formed this Save the Fox Committee, and it became the Alberta Bear Theater Performing Arts Committee, and they did that renovation at that time. I don't know the specific funding that the city put in, but for the whole project, you know, and certainly in today's dollars, it was minimal, but very appreciative. The city owns the building. We pay $1 a year to lease it back, and since that time, we have taken care of all of the maintenance of the venue, 100%. And we knew that was our responsibility, and that's what it is in the lease. It actually, you probably know, but it was the homestead of Alberta Bear. She was born on that city block. And so anyway, hence the renovation, we would have had to close our doors. I kid you not, within 5 years if we hadn't done the renovation. Came back to the city because also as the development director, every major donor I went to had 2 questions before they'd commit a dime. One was, the city owns the building. What are they going to do? And number 2 was, what is the Bear Trust going to do? And so without your support and theirs, this wouldn't have been possible, and our doors would have been shut. We know that prior to the renovation, as far as an economic impact in our community at that time, it was 4.2 million. When you look at the hospitality that we bring in, if there's a show, you can't even get into a restaurant without a reservation a couple weeks, you know, in advance. As with the Moss, we have a partnership with the school district and bring in about 20,000 kids a year to see live performing arts, which many of them are unable to experience without this program. And so since the renovation, and certainly not everything was covered in that, and things that they thought would be, weren't, and we've put in about $1.5 million. I think you have a report in your packet as to certain projects that either they thought would be okay, like our air conditioning heating unit, they thought was all right, and then it wasn't. And so we had to replace that. So we've put in about $1.5 million without asking for additional funding. And that's been through donations, fundraising events, writing grants, just working on our own to take care of the building as we know is our responsibility. We did, we had a SEPTED, did I say that right, Mehmet? Evaluation with the chamber and the city, and went through and talked about some of the things that we could make our venue more safe. So we put in cameras partially for the staff because they exit in the alley every night at maybe 1 or 2 in the morning, and who knows who they're gonna find. We put in cameras around the Broadway side of the building. We did have a little, there was a car accident right before we were even able to open after COVID that took out a street lamp and a street sign and was hit and run. And so, I mean, even the bank across the street didn't have cameras. And the police were saying, do you have cameras? So anyway, we wanted to put up bollards, and it was suggested at that time through the evaluation that we could apply, possibly, I mean, there's never a guarantee, for TIF funding because it is a safety issue on a city sidewalk where there's tons of liability. And so that is what inspired me to come to you. Like I said, we've tried to take care of everything, and we will continue to take care of the venue. I do not want you to at all be under the impression that our plan is to continue to come and ask for TIF funding, but this was a specific reason that we thought maybe we could partnership with. And so I wanted you to know, you know, it was probably about a month ago that I came, and it was kind of confusing, and I wasn't really sure where to go or what to do next. And then I heard from Chris, and he wanted some information from me, and so that's why I'm here tonight. I don't want to table, I don't want to not be able to ask for that. I just wasn't sure the next step. So, questions?
Very good. Thank you, Jan. I don't know if there are questions for Jan. Councilmember Kennedy?
Jan, thank you, and thank you for everything you folks have done for that. The reason we are here tonight is this is a council initiative that I brought forward because we heard from different people on this council. Are we going to sell, or will you own these buildings? Are you going to repair all the repairs that need to be done to the buildings and things like that? If Chris didn't relay that, that's really where this initiative came from. What I'm hoping by the end of this evening, that after reading through the packet here, that each of them, we just stay the course and no one's asking for general fund dollars. You're open, as well as anyone in the downtown TIF area, to ask for funding. That's not a problem. The problem I had the other night in the TIF funding is you prepared, you came forward, and then there was some deal cut before everybody presented that we would turn everything down, and then they come back with a proposal. And so we're getting it out in the open so everyone knows that, you know, if the council wants to go forward selling, if the council wants to do nothing. But the one thing I want to come out tonight is that the city will not be spending general fund on these buildings. And that's really where we're at. I think it's great if you come back and you ask for TIF funding. the tax increment financing funding is exactly what you have stated. I just want to make sure that everybody's on board, especially if you come before the council to, for funding. I think there's some mix-up between, I mean, we were given a sheet that said, please deny everything tonight. Well, why did we even have you come? And so that was one of the things that I have some real concerns about. But no, I think you should apply for TIF funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Kennedy.
Okay, thank you. And there are some staff recommendations. It's not to deny everything, but we'll get to that, I think, in the next couple of presentations. So if there are, Councilmember Neese?
Thank you, Mayor. I noticed in our presentation here, it mentioned that you guys charge a $3 facility fee. How long have you been charging that, and have you increased that over the years?
Yeah, it was $1 when I was.
It was $1.50 when Mayor Cole was our chair president.
How long ago
And
was
that is
that?
actually when it was
1800s.
implemented. And so I can't tell you that exact year, but I will tell you that in 2016, it was raised to $3 per ticket. And that is used for small theater repairs throughout the year, and then what is left in it at the end of the year goes into a board restricted fund that, like, I can't use it all for operations, and that is how we have sub-reserves to take care of the major improvements that we've had. Is that
It does help. Thank you. And thank you, Mayor, for starting that on there, because I think that's a great way to raise funds in that. So how many tickets a year do you sell?
our attendance? Well, we don't charge it on the student matinees, the 20,000. So right around, not counting their attendance, probably 75,000.
75,000. So another $1 would give you 75,000 a year if you were to add $1 to the ticket to pay for some of these projects.
Right.
Okay. All right, thank you. And Mayor, I had another question for Kevin or Chris. Okay, thank you. Kevin, Chris, as in some of these projects are not on the street, but the one project I think is the bollards or the poles, I believe, that they're out in front. I've seen others downtown areas that have these poles down there. Who paid for those, putting those in? Was that the city that did that, or was that the actual organization that fronts the property?
Mayor, Councilmember Neese, I do not know. In the past 6 years, there haven't been any bollard projects that I can recall coming through. So I can't say. Maybe someone here could tell us further back if tax increment financing dollars have been used. It looks like Katie maybe is the better person to give you some information there.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The bollards originally were part of the 1997 framework plan for the downtown Billings partnership. There were some tax increment financing dollars at that time, but it was a very, very small amount. But that was part of the original 1997 framework plan, along with the pedestrian lighting, other sidewalk kind of streetscaping aspect of that project. So it's been quite some time since any infrastructure such as bollards were invested. So.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's good to know.
Okay, Chris, next up.
Yeah, so next up then, we've got representatives from Billings Depot, Michelle Williams, Executive Director. And Michelle, too, wasn't expecting to speak tonight. We put all the information in the packet for you, but while we're on this roll here, I think it makes sense that all four, take the podium for at least a couple minutes. So if I could turn it over to Michelle.
Excellent.
And I apologize, Michelle. I just want to, Chris, Councilmember Kennedy stuck his head over and rightfully pointed out that in the alternative section, I think, of this is kind of taken from a business meeting. It says approve or not approve. It's a work session tonight, so at the most, we would be giving some direction to staff, if I
Correct.
understand the point there.
That's exactly right. My error on my part, I'm the one who did the memo, didn't put, because it's a work session, yes, I didn't put any alternatives. And again, this was, there isn't any formal action, but as was stated earlier, you can absolutely vote to give direction. You just can't take any final decision-making this evening.
Thank you for that clarification.
Mayor, just a comment on it. Chris, my initiative was to come back with these 4
Yes.
buildings to talk about them, but it wasn't talking about TIF and if we're going to vote on TIF or whatever. I think it needs to come back to a regular board meeting to have that. So I don't know why that's on here, but I would say it needs to come back to a regular board meeting to have a vote if we're going to talk about the TIF funding.
Yeah, and there wouldn't be any formal binding action taken tonight.
Correct. To be clear, just of, and I guess later, my presumption is we will circle back to that. But while the question's being asked, you had tax increment finance applications before you at a regular meeting. The determinant at that meeting was to turn down the Alberta Bear. It was to postpone, and I apologize, can't remember if you tabled or delayed the decision on the Babcock until we could have a conversation like this. So my memo's intent this evening was to get some direction as to what you want back on a future agenda. So after we finish that, that's the kind of direction I'm hoping we get clarity on.
Councilor McKinney, just on the process.
Mayor, Chris, the intent of my initiative was to talk on these 4 buildings. Once again, are we going to sell the property? Are we going to do nothing? Or are we going to fund any type of deferred maintenance on them? And, you know, as we're getting into the TIF and all of these other pieces, that should be a discussion, as a point of order, should be a discussion for a regular board meeting.
We're going to go ahead, and I would disagree that this is not an appropriate time for discussion on the maintenance issue, because that's really very important. But to Councilor McKinney's point, there will be no decisions about TIF funding at tonight's meeting. Okay. Michelle, go ahead.
Sure. Mayor Cole, Council, thank you for having me. I'm also joined by 2 of my board members, just here to answer any questions you might have about the TIP application or the Billings Depot in general. As Chris mentioned, we supplied a summary for your packet, which gives you a little bit of background as to why we submitted the application for TIF. The timeline that kind of details this trifecta of circumstances that came up that made TIF a reasonable road for us to travel down for funds. And then also just a little bit more information on the Billings Depot itself. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them for you. I think the general takeaway, the 3 points that are most important, is that the depot, even though we're a nonprofit, we do pay property taxes. The second is this is not an issue of critical deferred maintenance. We identified proactive repairs that needed to be done. We sourced grant funding to achieve them. The critical and urgency related to the TIF application is so that we don't lose these grant funds that we've secured. So I think those are the 3 points to take away.
Councilmember Boyette.
So I see there's a possible grant for $414,000. When do you need to say, yeah, we're going to do this and put your name in? I mean, at some point, will they say, no, you can't have it because you didn't apply or whatever?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. That time already came and went, and we did sign the contract with the state to secure those funds. The issue now is if we are not able to come up with the matching funds, we will lose that grant. We had the matching funds, but due to unforeseen repairs that snowballed this year, that has depleted our savings that we would typically use for those repairs. So the savings that we leveraged for this grant, for the matching funds, now is gone because of all of these repairs. So now, as I said, it's this perfect trifecta that has caused us to seek TIF funding to support the matching requirement.
Thank you, Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. I see in the memo it mentioned, I think initially it was a $95,000 request, but you obviously are still fundraising.
Absolutely.
And so you're down to 25,000 or 75,000. So by the time this gets through, I'm sure you're still going to continue to fundraise because you don't know what's going to happen with the TIF request or any kind of future. It's possible that request could be even less by the time you come back to us, or
Very
even when
possible.
it comes time to deliver the funds, it could even be less because you're still fundraising. So,
Yes, correct.
okay. Well, I appreciate that. I've been at the depot. In fact, we had a meeting there. It was, the only thing about it is it's such a great building. The acoustics are tough to hear in, but it's a great building to be in. So,
Yeah, thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Other questions for Michelle? Don't see any.
So Mayor and Council, just to summarize, and that's what I had put in the memo, when the decision was made to not fund the TIF request, I am under the impression, I believe this to be the case, I didn't, and I don't believe we made clear to the council that these guys are taxpayers. That may or may not change your opinion, but I thought it was worthy of noting and might be a cause for reconsideration, as well as, since Michelle and I met on this originally, the opportunity to retain the grant. So that changed circumstance is why I asked that you give some direction as to whether you'll reconsider or not, is why that was there. So thank you, Michelle.
I believe we also supplied a very conservative estimate for what that ROI would be over the course of 4-ish years.
Very good.
Thank you.
So last but certainly not least,
And Chris, or Kevin, do you have a way to drop that slide so we can see Councilmember Shaw?
well, although timing is not good to do that because we actually have another
okay.
PowerPoint presentation.
Okay, when that's
But
done.
as soon as we're done doing that, we can.
Very good.
we
Councilmember Shaw, if you
flip it
can hear
around.
us, feel free to interrupt at any point if we can't see you.
Got it, thanks.
So Josh Worth, the board president, and also Nicole Schreiner, the operations director, are both here tonight from the Babcock. And we've got a presentation of theirs with some material in it, as well as the material that it was a part of the packet. So I'd like to pull up that presentation for Josh. We let you know through the materials what our facilities manager, John Caterino, in working with Kevin and I, have on the table relative to some of the improvements that are necessary in the near term. So after this, I'm presuming we're going to circle back and talk about, and I've left the slide kind of last deliberately, as to what staff recommendations were, but which are just that. None of the decisions can be finalized tonight, but we're just looking on direction of what next steps to take. So Josh, I'm going to turn it over to you on the Art House in Babcock Theater.
Do you have a clicker for that? Or?
We do, and it's I've got it over here.
Thank you very much. Alrighty, well, Mayor Cole and council members, I appreciate you giving us the opportunity to speak up here. You're probably used to seeing a much taller gentleman in Matt Blakesley. He is on a much-deserved, oft-delayed sabbatical, so I am filling in his stead. So I'm going to speak basically to where things have been. One of the things, my name is Josh Worth. I'm the creative director for Kinetic Marketing and Creative. I'm the board president at the Art House. And we were basically looking at, over the course of years of conversation, we wanted to make sure that it was clear what is needed. There's been a lot of conversations as it's pivoted over the years of what's needed, lighting packages, et cetera, all these different things. And what we really wanted to get it down to is what the current state of it is. And I'm a big fan of the power of a presentation. So we'll click through this pretty quickly, hopefully. So, like I said, ultimately, we just wanted to get everything in the same place, that there's no confusion about what's needed and what's being done. So ultimately, the Art House, has been working in partnership with the City of Billings to preserve this property. And so we wanted to go through what that looks like. We started in 2018 with an initial walkthrough. That's led to conversations of what the Babcock Committee decided should be done. There was a presentation to City Council and request for funds, and then most recently in August, we requested those funds through the TIF, and it was postponed for further discussion. So currently what's been completed and in progress as of October 16th, we did things in phases basically. And so there was the initial assessment and the top priorities. So we had the architecture review for $5,000, the mop closet stairs support that was $26,000, and then the sidewalk vault project that ended up being about $268,000. The two projects at the top there have been completed, and the sidewalk vault, as you've probably seen, is almost complete. There's a big asterisk on that sidewalk vault project that we'll get into here in a minute. But ultimately, all of these, the two that were deemed most important were due to safety concerns. There was some talk of basically not wanting to, if there was a fire, you wouldn't want to park that fire truck on the concrete outside of the art house, or of the Babcock, because it could potentially fall through. So it was a critical, infrastructure item that needed to be repaired. Basically, what that vault project looked like is when we got the original estimates in 2021, it was sitting at about 184, and the final cost of that, just due to inflation, increased costs of everything, landed at about 268. As I said, when we talk about fund sources, we'll talk about what that looked like, as we did have a grant for that, but it was the grant was used for other pieces as well, and that sidewalk project ate up the entirety of that grant. Like I said, we'll get into the specifics of that later. Just a few photos as we, were repairing things and what the vault looked like before. So essentially, to date, Art House has contributed $299,000 roughly, and our funding is now really tied up in keeping the Babcock safe, and it's not being used to, fulfill the mission of bringing art and culture to the city of Billings. So without, the ability to fundraise and the ability for funds, we're continuing to put money into infrastructure, which, theater goers are not, it's hard to sell that we spent money on a sidewalk, basically. Critical as it is, it just doesn't, get the dollars feeling like they want to go towards that. So ultimately, projects that are still awaiting funding, and again, these have been prioritized. We've got safety concerns, and these are projects of the most, critical importance and are becoming liabilities. That we've got the balcony safety railing and the brick stack demo rebuild that are, estimated currently at about $80,000. Revitalization, these projects are, again, of critical importance, and to repair an aging marquee. And so there's a breakdown of what that looks like with, estimated inflation as well. And so the total funds for that are coming in at around 116. Obviously, there's things that we're not going to ask money for because it's hard to sell. You don't need to have pay for letters, although we might have to change our programming to have films that have the letters that we currently have. But we're prepared to do the fundraising for that, and that's an example of exactly what we would want to be doing fundraising for. Additional to that, we also have, projects that will enhance the efficiency and the improving life safety of the building, which is the entry doors, the alley exit doors, and the outside entry floor. And so you can see the total funds there as well. So all told, all of those together, we've got the safety, we've got the revitalization, and we've got the efficiency and safety, 80,116 and 80 coming in at 276,000. So like I said, we've already, redirected critical funds to cover these essential repairs that weren't originally funded. And so now with this next pass of projects that we need to do, we're really needing to put the money into those things before we look to enhance the theater goers experience with, better sound, better light, things that we would want to fundraise for. We're putting our money towards those critical infrastructure items. So talk about funding sources really quick. Obviously, we've got hopefully everybody's aware that we did have the Montana Historic Preservation Grant. The way that grant is structured, we'll go to in another slide, but ultimately it has to pay for the door, the sidewalks, the entry floors, and the marquee. So parts of those, of that grant has to go towards those projects. And obviously, we have member and community donations. So as you can see here, this is that breakdown that essentially of that $236,000 that we received, that was, again, hours of time from our team members to get that grant, which I'm grateful that they did. But a minimum of $5,000 has to be spent on all 4 of those projects to satisfy the grant. And ultimately, like I said, with the sidewalk coming in significantly higher than what was anticipated, you can see that it just ate up all of those funds. So ultimately, what we have to do is kind of reallocate some of our dollars to then be able to pay for that sidewalk so that then we can satisfy the grant, which is paying for the $5,000 for those other 2 parts of the grant. Additionally, there was another project that hasn't been estimated yet. The City of Billings facility manager, recommended that the projection booth repair, as it's starting to fall away from the building, and it could be, become a larger structural failure. So currently, the engineering analysis of that's at $4,000, but the cost of that is unknown at this point. So again, because this isn't, an actual, a meeting where we can be asking for what these TIF funds could look like. What we did do, however, was come up with a proposal in partnership with the DBA to look at like what that could look like when we come down to that. So that again, we're only utilizing TIF funds that would be for these critical infrastructure items and things that have precedent of having been paid for in previous uses of TIF funds. So obviously, we don't need to go through this line item by line item, but ultimately what we need to do is do some reconfiguring of some of the funds should we move forward with the TIF proposal, so that we can satisfy the grant and then also utilize funds to finish some of these projects. And so really, ultimately, just wanting to say that this is the partnership that we have with the city is critical in maintaining, these facilities. And it's an honor to stand up here with the other people who have managed these properties, because there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that goes into making these properties amazing places that people in our city can go to. So, like I said, I have been the board president for about 6 months, so I'm fairly new to this. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but I might also have to defer to our operations director.
Very good. So you're ready for questions, Josh, if we've got
Yes.
them? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you very much. Appreciate all the detail.
Absolutely.
Very important, of course. So questions for Josh. Councilmember Bernice?
Thank you, Mayor. Josh, as I was going through the presentation, there was mention of several different items that are, need to be repaired, but I didn't see pictures of them. I have not been to the Babcock, so I don't really know what really needs to be repaired or doesn't need to be repaired. So, and I could be wrong on this, but the only picture I saw of a railing was the one that was missing on that one picture. Is that where you're talking about, one railing? It looks like one flight of stairs is $50,000, or is
No, the primary railings are in the balcony, and we could send pictures of that as well, and that would be something that we could amend the presentation. But the majority of those would be up in the balcony.
Okay.
And so those weren't pictured here, no, sorry.
Okay, yeah, it would be helpful to kind of understand.
Yeah.
I mean, like I say, I have not toured the Babcock, and I think some of the other people have, but for the public, I'm not sure what the safety concerns are without actually seeing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Rufus?
Thank you, Mayor. I actually think I have a question for Gina, if that's okay and appropriate. All right. So Gina, the Babcock lease is very different than the Alberta Bear and the Depot lease in that those 2 leases are pretty specific that the city has no responsibility for anything. It's all on you guys. But the Babcock has a whole section about this is how repairs are going to be managed, and the city might be funding or might do some things through their budget process. There are purchasing limits at different levels. There are expectations of communications to council and approval by council in certain situations. I wonder if you could talk us through that section so that we can really understand what our city's obligations were. If there's any way for you to gain intent of what was done and why, help us educate on that section of the lease, I guess, because it's so different than everything else.
Sure, Councilmember Ripsis, I will do my best, but certainly we can have this interactive and you can ask me questions as we go, because it appears to me to be clear that the city isn't required to make any improvements, but it's also my understanding that back in 2018, the intent was that the city that council would put money aside to make the improvements that were necessary. And it did that in 18, but then didn't do that for some reason in 2019. And the section I think that you're referring to, section 6, as I indicated, does not require the city to make any improvements. The lessee is not obligated to make any improvements. However, then it goes on to explain that normal repairs under 10,000 can be undertaken by the lessee right away. Those don't need to be run through the city, but anything higher than that would need to go through the city approval process. And any expenditures exceeding that were 80,000 or more would have to receive approval from council and go through the competitive bidding process. Beyond that, I'm not exactly sure what more you want me to go through. I'm happy to answer any other questions.
There's also another paragraph, I think the second to last paragraph in that section, that says the purchasing procedures don't apply to renovations that the lessee does at their own expense.
And I think that that's referring back to the paragraph, the normal repairs that are under 10,000 that they could go ahead and do, though that do not require city approval. Because if you read up if you go up to the top of the page, the second paragraph indicates that normal repairs, which do not exceed $99,999, will be undertaken by the lessee as soon after discovery as can reasonably be arranged. So I believe that's what it's referring to, that those kind of repairs that the lessee just can automatically go ahead and take care of without city approval.
So this $270,000 that we've already done, or the Babcock has already done with the sidewalk, how does that fit into here? It certainly didn't come to council for approval. Should it have?
I'm going to let Chris address that.
So my non-legal interpretation is yes, that it identifies that projects that exceeded, actually, the plain language of it says over $500 in value, references back to our donation policy that should have come before this board. It did go, as I understand it, did go to the committee. But yes, for whatever reason, the step did not get taken, bringing it here for you to accept, in essence, the gift that the Art House Theater had had received the grant and raised the match dollars to do the projects. I think in hindsight, in reading the agreement, that should have taken place. We should have come here and let you know that good news that they got the grant and the match dollars to take care of that project.
Councilor Rose, I hate to insinuate myself, but I will anyway. I think a big issue would be, what is it that they were leasing from us that this agreement applies to? And I suspect that the description of the real property, it says is the real property commonly known as the Babcock Theater, which probably ends at the front of that building as opposed to in the right-of-way in the sidewalk. So I think you could also say they perhaps had no obligation, they were just voluntarily taking care of city-owned property with our agreement. That'd be an important issue.
Okay, I'm not so worried about that, honestly. What I'm trying to get at is, Gina, in your opinion, would the lease have been written this way if the intent was not to have the city in a partnership here and picking up some of these costs, or at least budgeting and considering these costs during the budgeting process? kind of what it seems like to me. Like, the others are just very cut and dry. It's not the cities, right? But this one is written very differently.
I would agree with that. I think that, especially when you go back and look at the 2018 memo, staff memo, I think that it appears to me that that was the intent, that it would very much be, I guess, a partnership.
Annual
The city-
process.
Yes.
Thank you.
I can offer some clarification that we did confirm that $500,000 was not only budgeted, it was expended. So, but in 2019, there was no funds that we could find that were appropriated in the 2019 fiscal year budget. And the closest we could come is the memo that we referenced of what an intent was, which is why I included that in the packet material for you.
Very good. Councilor Manise?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to clarify something both it was in the presentation, I think it was just referred to as the committee. Is that a city committee or is that the Art House committee? Can you explain what this, when you're talking about the funding source, I think you, Kevin, said it came to the committee and they looked at it and approved it, or I'm not sure if they approved it, but they looked at it. What committee are we talking about?
So Councilmember Neese, that was a council committee that was formed, and I think it mentions that in the lease, if I'm not mistaken here, in one of the paragraphs about a Babcock Improvements Committee.
Okay, so it's a council committee, and that's met in November 23, is that the committee you're talking about?
Yeah, it basically in the contract, it alludes that it's an advisory group known as the Babcock Improvements Committee. So that was written into the lease and then agreed to by the city council.
Okay, so that wasn't in 23, that was in 18, or when the lease was done?
Correct, I believe in early 2018, if I recall.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. I'll just put a little historic context to Councilmember Roops' point. I agree. You're absolutely right. And part of that was because at that time, the building was just the city's. We really didn't have a partner, right? And we didn't know who was going to operate it. And Art House put their hand up and said, well, I guess, we're willing. And they had their hands full with the Art House Cinema 2 blocks over. And they've hit it out of the park, really, in retrospect. But at the time, we did not have a well-heeled, well-moneyed fundraising partner. And so I think that may explain part of that expectation in the group. So, other questions for Josh, Councilmember Kennedy?
Is the intention of your board as the leasee of the property, is it the intent that you would seek funding from TIF funds, but you're not looking at the city general fund to pay for any deferred maintenance?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Anything else before we move toward wrapping this discussion up? Councilmember Ripsis?
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor. Chris, maybe my expectations were wrong, but I thought when this came back to us, we were going to be talking about more of a long-term plan for how we were going to maintain these city-owned properties. And it sounds like several of them, we don't have to worry about that. It's written in the lease, we don't have to worry about, but this one we definitely do. Do we have any kind of insights into a long-term plan for how we will work with this partnership over we're in the lease for at least another 10 years and up to, 20 or 25, it looks like, based on how the lease is written. Do we have a plan for that?
So, Councilmember Roops, Mayor and Council, so in your packet material for tonight, John shared with us as our facilities manager in his work with the committee, he does believe that there's upwards of $2 million worth of improvements that ultimately need to be made. They're not all urgent today, but they are listed there. What I asked him to do is frankly, give us the list of all the projects and prioritize them, recognizing our resources are limited as to what we can do. So tonight, I wanted you to have that information, but yes, we're not here tonight recommending on what the long-term piece is. I wanted you to have the lease so we could all read and understand what that was from roughly 6 years ago. And I think it's not coincidental. I think as I look at the Babcock in this roughly 6-year relationship, the depot at about 16 years, the Moss and ABT at 4 decades. They're all in different places. And all through our one-on-one meetings have kind of expressed both the appreciation to be heard tonight, but also that they're not all in the same place with each other, and I think that's very obvious. So to your question, we did not come tonight thinking we were going to resolve that issue, but that it needs to be when we come back. But there are some urgent needs, in particular at the Babcock, and to take advantage of the grant for the depot. So I looked at this as a two-step thing. Can we take care of the things that are right in front of us and possibly come back with what appears to really only be a long-term plan needed to where we go in the relationship with the Babcock Theater?
I'm going to suggest, I'm going to open up for public comment because we're going to now move into a real point of discussion, I think. So let's hear, we want to make sure we hear from the public. So if you would like to comment, please come forward.
Can we take a break?
We have a request for a break, so we can
Or
sure
do you
do
want to
that.
wait? Yeah, or wait after public comment, but
Let's take a break now, and that'll allow you to prepare your comments, Jorge.
Very brief comment.
That's okay. Let's take a break first, and we'll come back, and then we'll be fresh.
Okay.
So we'll be right back in 7:35. We'll try to be back as close to 7:40 as possible.
Two brief comments. I live in the Castle building, which was also built in 1903. It's on the National Historic Register, undergoing $180,000 of renovation right now. Hopefully most of it paid by Travelers Insurance. But I was just going to say to the council, if you're interested in purchasing another city-owned building, I could leave my card.
Yeah, for the right price. Yes.
For that $1 a year, maybe. And then I am on the board of Art House Babcock. I'm on the board of the Alberta Bear Theater. I'm also the program director at the Alberta Bear Theater. And I was actually the first employee of the Fox committee. Ray Hart from Hart Albans hired me in 1984 to help with marketing and fundraising to turn the Alberta Bear Theater over. So for many, many years, I have been involved with fundraising, most recently, certainly with Art House and the Babcock, and forever with the Alberta Bear Theater. And I would just say, as I prepare to write letters to our donors, we have organizations that are really well run in this city. I think of Billings as really a cultural oasis for so many people in southeast Montana, northern Wyoming. They're well run. But when I'm writing a letter to donors, I don't really want to be asking for money for a handrail or for a bollard in the street. Those aren't really very sexy things for people to give money to. I would just encourage wherever the money comes from, whether it's a city or TIF, and clearly you are negotiating those things, that things like public safety should really be on the foremost mind of the council, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Hi, my name's Adam Kern, 435 Hanson. Tonight really opened my eyes, but I'm excited to hear about the three that are kind of stand on their own and that the city doesn't have to kick money into. As a taxpayer, I know we all are taxpayers. It's nice to have organizations that we don't have to kick money into. And I've been to all four facilities and I like all of them. And I understand that's way earlier on with the Babcock. I think the Babcock has a great opportunity to be a great location with great venue and stuff. But it is, when you walk in there, it feels run down, very run down compared to all the other ones that I ran. And it'd be nice if it wasn't taxpayer, but I don't know how you could ever do that without selling the building and having somebody take it over and turn it into another event venue. I also think that there's quite a few event venues in Billings, and maybe it's after COVID or whatever, but it just feels like we've gone down with events coming to town, and maybe it's just the public not going out to event as much. I know like Sean at the pub station was going to build that big venue, and I know things fell apart in certain ways, like an outdoor venue, and then, you see the Red Ox one, it just doesn't seem like it's used that much, and then we throw two downtown ones, it's tough, and I know they pull in different crowds, they used to have the boxing down there, concerts, rougher concerts, and then you have the very, symphonies and stuff at the other one. But I still think it'd be great if somehow figure out that one cannot be a whole bunch of taxpayer dollars coming in. But I understand that you need different venues for different things. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comment? Is there any other public comment on this item before we close the public comment period? Okay, nobody is coming forward, so we'll close the public comment period. Council discussion, Councilmember Gulick, Councilmember Denise.
Thank you, Mayor. So I think we have this discussion is tough because we have some great projects. I mean, these are all great buildings and cultural treasures for Billings. I'm just really appreciative of all what they do to city and enriching the whole community. But the tough decisions because we don't have a lot of money to work with from I think either TIF perspective or otherwise. I know if I don't have good answers, my tendency would be to sort of kick the can down the road a little further. Maybe something will happen in the meantime, but we have some very time-sensitive things that need to be addressed. So I think we should give some, we can't make a binding decision tonight. It's not a business meeting, but I think we should have as best we're able to come up with some real direction so that people come away tonight having a good idea of where things are going. One of my thoughts is there's not enough TIF dollars that we heard from the downtown partnership to do these projects as well as other major priorities for them. So I think the easiest thing would be say, well, just fund them all with TIF dollars. I don't think we can do that. However, we do have a mechanism called the revolving loan fund. I wonder if we might be able to have these projects funded to some degree with some TIF dollars, and then the balance done with the revolving loan fund. That would take care of the most pressing, time issues that these entities are facing. We can take advantage of the Montana Historic Preservation Grant. We want to make sure we do not let that opportunity drop. And then just gives, the revolving loan gives them more time to do community fundraising. I think the city TIF, I think we could put some in as well. We're doing our part, but I don't think we're in a position to certainly fund them all. I did talk to our friends at Downtown Billings Alliance. They had talked to Andy some just to find out what the opportunities are with the revolving loan in terms of loaning to one of our city-owned project. And it seems to be a mechanism we can do, and we can even, right now, the interest rate has just been lowered to 7%, but if we decided we could even lower it further, there's a committee that weighs in on this that gives their recommendations, but I think we could even go slightly lower, 6% or 5%. Something that can take care of these immediate needs and make sure that they get take advantage of the other grant funds. So I'll throw that out there for discussion as a point of departure.
Okay, thank you. I'd recognize Councilmember Neese, Councilor Joy, Councilor Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. We've heard often in these presentations that there's liability out there, which I don't disagree with, but our city attorney is just returning. So I guess I did have a question for her because, we heard the liability for the ballards not being there. We heard the liability for, the sign, which I agree, and other things at the Babcock, the railings, there's potential liability there. So I guess, I think any sidewalk you drive on, I would imagine the city would have just as much liability as anything else. So I'm not so sure. So some of these things rise to a liability that put the city in any greater liability than any other sidewalk or any other building. I guess it would then depend on, if there's neglect. And so I think if any of those, and my concern is more about the Babcock in how that was received in that. And so I kind of agree, Chris, I agree what you said about these are all different stages of their life cycle. The Moss Mansion does a great job. They had a great presentation. Mike Nelson knew exactly what he was doing, like he always does. And he really sold the project on the fact that, they don't really have to ask for money. Of course, they've had a longer time than these others. They showed the fact that they're bringing value to the community through being number one in lots of different areas. And so I think that's a great model that these other organizations probably look towards and try to accomplish as well. But my concern is, and I agree with Councilmember Goulet, because I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago about the revolving loan option. That is a good option to consider on this. And so one of these, or some of these projects, we may want to consider sharing some of those, or at least a portion of that. especially since the TIF funding is low, and we've got a recommendation from the TIF board not to approve them. And the other thing is, again, I look at the depot and I like the fact that they've actually come in for less money. They're working hard. I mean, really, any one of these projects, there's people in the city that probably can write a check and pay for it tonight. And you know, when you're looking at the grand scheme of things. But I'm looking for, you know, if the Babcock itself, my biggest concern about that is, as we heard tonight, is, you know, if you walk into it, you drive by it. Now, the fact that they're cleaning up these sidewalks and stuff, it's going to look a lot nicer, just at least from the outside. It may not be that area, it's something you really are attracted to. And so, you know, I'm involved in some fundraising projects ourselves, and, you know, it's not easy. Well, our first fundraising project we did was for $100,000 15 years ago to put in a sewer system that's in the ground. No one sees it. And so that was a tough project to raise for, but you had to do it, and you had to cast visions to capture those people that donate. I think something like the Babcock, if they're saying there's $2 million in renovations, they need to come up with a fundraising plan for $2 million to see how it's going to happen. And get some drawings, get some pictures, sell the project. It could be the next Moss Mansion, you know, #1 visiting site in Billings, if, you know. And so I think that we heard some really good testimony tonight, some great projects that have been around for a long time, and ones that are still kind of infant, you know, just developing. So I think we need to do some, and I would support moving some of these projects forward to come back to council. Some requests for TIFs, probably some requests for revolving on some of these projects, but I'm not going to.
You're good. Councilmember Joy, Councilmember Boyette, Councilmember Shaw. And I apologize. And then at some point, I'd like an update on the status of our TIF district. Okay, so just a heads up on whether that's some staff or partnership representatives. But Councilmember Joy?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I have a question for Katie. And what I recall back when we had this discussion about the TIF applications, maybe you could kind of refresh my memory or add some details about the decision of the board to not recommend approval. And I want to understand that a little bit more clearly. At council, we have our boards and commissions and everything that forward those recommendations, and their discussion and interest in what's happening is really vital. So I want to understand that just a little bit more clearly. Thank you.
Mayor and Council, Councilmember Joy, each of the 3 TIF districts in our community go through the same process. An application comes into the staff, whether that's through the East Billings Urban Renewal District, South Billings, or downtown's districts. That application is then walked through with the staff member, prepared to go in front of the development committee. Each of those TIF districts have their own development committee. The development committee has the opportunity to meet with the applicant, walk through the project, and then ultimately they make a recommendation to in our case, the Downtown Billings Partnership Board. At that point in time, the Downtown Billings Partnership Board also has an opportunity to see a presentation by the applicant, have a great deal of discussion and communication with them, and they ultimately make a recommendation to City Council, who then makes the final decision on which projects are funded through tax increment financing. In this case, over the past 3 to 4 years, we have come in front of council when you approve our budgets. In addition to approving our budgets, you also approve our work plan, which includes our strategic priorities. Those priorities have remained the same over the last 4 years. We are focusing on housing, we are focusing on infrastructure, safety, and mixed-use development. Because the tax increment financing funds are limited, we really want to be intentional with the projects that we approve or recommend for approval to council. In this case, with the projects that we saw that we're discussing tonight, they did not fit within the strategic priorities, which our partnership board has over the years approved, and council by approving our budget and work plans have also approved those strategic priorities. So that is the ultimate reason why the Downtown Billings Partnership Board did not recommend approval for these projects.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Katie, you want Katie to stay here, I think, probably.
Or you or Matt, but, or both of it. Let's tag team. Come on. So I noticed in our staff report, it says there was a $600,000 reimbursement agreement that didn't go through. So does that mean you have excess funds of $600,000? Question.
Mayor and Councilmember Boya, excellent question, thank you. Yes, there is some, however, and both you and Councilmember Rupses have been in attendance in the past of the board meetings. The partnership currently uses a tactic of projecting the forecast of the TIF district by projecting zero growth as a conservative measure to withstand some of those years when we have lost revenue. So with that allocation, it shows that we have about a 267,000 surplus that we can play with if we continue to do that projection, and that could be allocated to a future project.
Well, Mayor.
Please.
So if the council says, we like you to change your direction, let's go this way instead of that way, are you amenable to that?
Certainly, yeah. I mean, it's a partnership between the board and council, and the board chose to go with that direction to be more cautious with the projections. But if we have further direction from council, we'll take that into consideration, definitely.
So if we said we wanted you to work on the Babcock and the depot somehow, you could come up with some kind of a plan based on those figures that you have?
Oh, you mean like a long-term plan or a funding mechanism?
The funding mechanism.
Yeah, I mean, any direction I receive, I can take it back to the board, certainly.
And how long would it take you to do that?
Typically, the board meets on the fourth Friday of every month, but we've also done some cases, if it was an emergency, where we pull in a special meeting for the board. We just poll everyone to see when they're available, and then we convene to meet.
Thank you.
Mehmet, if I can, don't go far away, but I recognize Councilmember Rashad. I want to give her a chance. I'm going to come back at you. So, Councilmember Rashad, go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I was going to make a motion to direct staff to move forward, Your Honor. So if you still have further questions for Mehmet, maybe circle back to me after you're done.
If you wouldn't mind, just a little bit. I just want to follow up on we do have a letter from the partnership recommending no to anything on these projects. And you did not sign that letter, Mehmet, but Sean Lynch and Ethan Canning did. The letter concludes by saying that per the annual budget and approval of City Council, the Downtown Billings Partnership's current priorities are anchor development, business development, infrastructure, public safety. And Katie alluded to some of these. I think you have to agree that none of these projects are anchor developments, which I think would be defined as some giant project, I guess, that would be transformative. Business development. If we had money, a TIF application for a restaurant, that would clearly be business development. But if a restaurant, if those doesn't have any customers downtown, that's a problem. And this brings those customers. Each one of these generates millions of dollars worth of business in our downtown. You're nodding your head, so these are kind of softball questions. You see where I'm going on this, or infrastructure. A sidewalk where a fire truck might fall through is clearly infrastructure. Public safety. We all want to have people living downtown because it's famous eyes on the street. And we would be glad to support a project that even added 10 people to living downtown, because then you got 20 eyes. But these businesses bring, we've already heard 70,000 people in the case of the ABT each year, times two, that's 140,000 eyes before we even talk about the other three. So I just want to kind of make the point, and you're the person I can make it to, I guess, that a lot of these priorities, at least indirectly, are accomplished through these projects, all of them. So that was not a question for you, but you provide a good prop, Mehmet. But I do want to give you a chance if you want to disagree with any of that or comment further.
No, yeah, I would say each of it was touched, and I would remind Mayor and Council that I am typically, in this case, the messenger of the board, and the board, in that same letter earlier, they stated the 4 reasons that all these entities have been supported in the past with TIF. The projects themselves at the time of the application were not deemed blighted or vacant in the true definition of the state law. They also, at the time of application, did not succeed the but-for test that is critical in the TIF applications. And then that these 4 projects, the fourth element was that, forgive me, I'm forgetting, there was a fourth reason there. Let's see, supported, the but-for, the.
And the
Yeah.
but-for test is, it's the partnership's position that these projects will happen whether there's TIF money or not.
The committee, much like the council, when the presenter comes to council, both the committee and the board will ask the applicant typically during their presentation, if you don't get TIF dollars, what will you do? And so that's where, based on that answer from the applicant, they decide if they are passing or not. And then but then also the board reiterated that this does not prohibit these applicants from applying again in the future. And then they would like to see, should the ownership structure continue the way it is, they would like to see a long-term solution and would like to work together.
Okay, thank you very much. I had recognized Councilmember Shaw and Councilmember Joy. Is it okay we go to Councilmember Shaw or?
It's just a question from
Councilmember Shaw, I'm going to turn it to you unless you want to defer to Councilmember Joy to ask a question about Matt.
If you have a question, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Shaw. One question, centrally assessed properties, and in the month of October. So do you know anything about where centrally assessed are going to come in for your budget, for this year, this coming budget year?
Mayor and council and Councilmember Joy, we did, from the previous assessment of this year, so August of this year, a portion of the lost revenue wasn't contributed toward from the centrally assessed, one of the centrally assessed properties. If the question is about next year's assessment, we do not know that typically until August of '25 is when we'll see that.
Okay.
Thank you. So I have the wrong month. October is the month for property taxes, but maybe not centrally assessed. So you're really not projecting any loss of revenue from the district for this year?
Oh, gotcha. No, sorry for my misunderstanding. That loss that we've been informed about already has been implemented into the budget for FY '25, yes.
Okay. Councilmember Shaw, Councilmember Kennedy is raising his hand. Same situation. Councilmember Kennedy, or Councilmember Shaw, she wants to make a motion.
Go ahead.
Okay.
But I would say we have no motions, we have no minutes on this, and so it's just whatever she wants to say is fine, but we cannot vote tonight.
Well, we can vote, but it has to be only what our ordinance says, direction to staff. We cannot take final action, and we've made that point, I think, quite clear. So with that understanding, Councilmember Shaw, I assume that is your intent, but correct me, is that correct? Yeah, you're nodding your head.
That's correct, exactly. Yes,
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to direct staff to put on, as soon as possible, an upcoming business agenda item, TIF funding for both the Babcock and the depot so they can meet their grant match requirements and move forward. And the reason why I think these are different than the Alberta Bear is they have that looming grant out there that both of them do, that we don't want to lose that match money. The Babcocks has already been pretty much entirely eaten up by their sidewalk repair, which shouldn't surprise any of us, having gone through the City Hall renovation, those construction costs just keep going up. So we're grateful they're taking care of it, but it means their dollars have been spread pretty thin. I think between the stone project coming off, and there's a few other things in the downtown TIF budget that can maybe be moved around. To me, these are really imminent. They need to happen sooner rather than later. I don't look at the revolving loan fund as a viable option for those two, because that's still going to require that money to be paid back. Both of these entities have already raised a large amount of money. I look at the Babcock, and basically what they're asking for is a match. They're saying we've come up with this grant application that we succeeded in. We've also put up $60,000 in cash. Can the city match this so that we can complete these really critical projects? I think whatever we decide for the future is part of a different conversation, but I would make that motion to direct staff to move forward with bringing those two back to us. Don't go back through the TIF board. I think that the process, they've already done that. Council can take action on this without delaying. And so that's what I would recommend if there's a second.
Okay, just a motion to put it on a future agenda with a positive recommendation for those two. Dollar amount was not specified. I guess that would be up to staff, but only for the Babcock and the depot. So that's the motion. Is there a second to the motion? Councilmember Boyette has the second on the motion. Okay, so that's the item for discussion. Any further discussion on now that there's a specific motion? Councilmember Kennedy?
Yes. Katie, when we had the TIF hearing, what was stated, and you weren't here that evening, but it was stated that the TIF board would come back with a recommendation, and with about the four, there was something worked out and all of that. Are you guys ready to come back with a recommendation?
Mayor and Council, Councilmember Kennedy, I don't recall being given direction to come back with anything at this point in time.
Chris?
Mayor, Council, Councilmember Kennedy, I specifically asked the TIF board, and they, through their letter, provided the response of which they were very clear to me in their prior board meeting. The recommendation isn't going to change. That's consistent with the letter that we have, and that's consistent with the policy direction they've taken. What they don't have to consider, but you all know, and Mr. Kennedy, you made the statement clearly earlier, we're not using general fund dollars. There aren't general fund dollars to put into this. So that's in part why, too, I'm making a recommendation to you that we do move them forward, that we do use TIF funds. They've weighed in. I've asked for that feedback. You've gotten that feedback. I think to Councilmember Kennedy Shaw's comment, I'm not expecting anything different from the TIF board because that letter is just days old. That's their consistent position. And they understand why you may choose to make the investments.
Okay. It was stated that they would come back, but that's fine. What I would say is if the staff is going to bring a recommendation back to us, then our board can go ahead and vote on it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you are the final say in TIF dollar expenditures.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Joy.
Thank you. Councilmember Shaw, I have a question for you. Just to clarify, you're not including in your motion any kind of dollar amount in terms of what that TIF application or that TIF ask might be, number one, and number two, that you're prioritizing the match that's necessary for the grant funding. Is that correct? Thank you.
That's correct. I left the dollar amount open because I leave it up to our staff. I think John Cattery, he's in the room. I think we leave it up to him to work with the Babcock as they get actual bids for what these projects will cost and then return to us when the date that we can vote with those hard numbers.
Very good, thank you. Councilmember Neese, and Council, I recommend we move to a vote soon.
Thank you, Mayor. I support this, bringing these projects back, but I'm going to make a motion to amend. I'm going to make an amendment to the motion to include, when the city brings us back, the option additionally for an option with the revolving line of credit funds, besides, not just limited to TIF, but also include revolving line of credit funds. And I'll speak to my motion if there's a second.
Okay, second by Councilmember Gulick. And just to clarify, Councilmember Neese, you're not saying that staff's recommendation necessarily has to include a certain dollar amount of loan, but that they, I'm putting words in your mouth, just want your clarification, that they at least look at that as an alternative as part of a package, or?
Yeah, so I'll speak to my motion is because when you look at the numbers of what they need and when you look at the numbers of what Mamet said they have, it doesn't match. There's not enough TIF dollars to go around. And so in order to fully fund both of these, they're going to have some other option of funding. And so for us to just restrict this to just TIF funding, then I think they're going to be short. And so I think we need to come up with a solution, because as I look at these, I think they all need to be funded in some way or another on these two that we're looking at. But if we only looking at TIF dollars, there's not enough funds to go around.
Okay. Council, are we ready to vote on that? Any objection to that? So if, Councilmember, okay, discussion on the proposed amendment, Councilmember Joy.
Thank you. I think this is a question that's directed to Mr. Casey. The revolving loan fund has an interest rate, and as they're both nonprofits, if you consider two, I don't know how many applications, every application is a nonprofit. And you're talking about using then they have a interest rate associated with them. Wouldn't they essentially be fundraising to pay off the debt? If we were to loan them money, essentially fundraising then becomes not paying for an expense, but actually fundraising for paying off the debt. Maybe you're not the right person to answer that question, but in general, you work with nonprofits. Thank you.
Mayor and Councilmember Joy, yes, I mean, they'll essentially fundraise to pay back the loan and the interest that builds off of which, as Councilmember Kulik mentioned, it just went down to 7%. Unless, again, the council body is choosing to set a different rate for these entities, and or unless they're choosing to process that differently. I mean, I haven't looked into all the details. I would imagine probably we'll need some consultations with city administration staff in terms of, is it legal or possible to even waive the interest fee? Understandably, that means you're not making money off of these loans. You're just having them paid back as the same amount you loaned out. But I don't know all the details that go into these decisions.
Okay. Councilmember Boyette.
That the motion would include the staff trying to explain to us what a revolving loan is, how it works, who pays it back, how does the interest work? I mean, all of the details associated with that.
I think that's understood, right? Councilmember Neese is nodding his head. So, all right, we're ready to vote. I'll vote in favor of this because Councilmember Neese has clarified it, and at least by my understanding, that this is really for staff to look at as a supplement to TIF funding along the lines of what's been discussed, not in lieu of or as a replacement to. So that's my understanding. Councilmember Ripsis?
Just a quick comment. I'm going to go ahead and support this right now, but I think, in my own opinion, it's probably more relevant for the depot than the Babcock at this point, given how the leases are written differently. And the depot is really essentially being bailed out because they had some unexpected expenses that were eating up the match that they had. I think that's more appropriate for a loan. The Babcock, I think, sits better with the city.
Okay, thank you.
Better matching partner.
Thank you. Ready to vote? We'll vote on the proposed amendment. This is only the amendment to add that staff direction to address the revolving loan funding possibilities. Councilmember Joy, you want to comment before we vote?
Before we vote.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm not going to support the motion simply because even though staff will look into this and may not move forward a loan, I can't imagine that fundraising, if you find fundraising difficult for bollards to keep your own patrons safe, I can't imagine how difficult it would be to fundraise to pay back a loan with interest. So I'm not going to, I don't think it would put them in a very good position, so I'm going to vote no.
Okay, very good, thank you. We'll move to the vote. Again, just on the amendment, if in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. In favor, council members Gulick, Neese, Kennedy, Boyette, Ripsis, Cole. If voting in opposition, raise your hand. Voting in opposition, council members Joy, council member Shaw. So the amendment succeeds. Now with the proposed, now amended underlying motion, any other discussion, or are we ready to vote? Councilmember Gillen.
Again, maybe this is, I mean, I'll support the motion. I think that these projects need to have some TIF funding. Again, but I also say that the entity who's not here is the downtown Billings partnership. I'm looking out for their interests as well in terms of, that's why I'm proposing we have some loan aspect as this as well. There are other needs as well in the community, and I want to make sure that they have funds as well.
Very good. Okay, we'll proceed to a vote on the amended motion. If in favor of the amended motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. That concludes, I think, item number 2. Thank you, staff. Thank you for all the organizations, the great volunteers. You heard it before. These are 4 gems in the crown of downtown Billings. Downtown Billings and all of Billings would not be the same place that it is today if it weren't for these 4 organizations and all the volunteers, donors, and staff. So thank you. We'll just continue to make them even better. That are our agenda items. We'll move now to any council or any highlights, Chris, for future agenda items before we go to council discussion and public agenda on things not on our agenda.
In the weekly last week, you had the draft or the capital improvement plan. It was presented at a high level to Budget and Finance last week, so just asked you to take a look at that. Budget and Finance will continue to look at that at their next meeting, and then you've got work sessions coming up here in the next few months for that. That's the biggest policy issue you have here as we get in the last few months of the year. So other than that, and then, yeah, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Councilmember Kennedy, so now we're moved on to council discussion. Councilmember Kennedy, Councilmember.
I'm still on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Just something on Chris's report. Go ahead, Councilmember Dees.
Yeah, Chris, the item number 5 on the next week is the secondary reading of the ordinance, but I thought, weren't we going to hold open the public comment on that, or have public comments?
So just to clarify, so in the weekly, we provide what is our draft of the next several months. In fact, I think it goes all the way out a year, so we don't lose track of some things that are revolving. That document shows that second reading on consent, because that's the normal pattern. The agenda that's been publicized took that off consent, put it on action per your request. So just to be crystal clear, by law, it's not a second public hearing that requires additional advertising, time gap, things of that nature. But it is not on consent, it's on regular action. You will all make a decision on second reading, and as always, the public has the opportunity to be heard on any agenda item where a decision is being made. So public will be heard, given the opportunity. It's on the regular agenda, not on consent. What you're looking at, I believe, is from the weekly that just prints out lets you see what the anticipated things are coming up.
So there will be an opportunity, but if you want to remind me at that day to remind the public that if they want to comment, they need to comment at the beginning of the meeting, we can do that.
But can we not change the agenda to have allow public hearing or public comment at that time?
Yes, you could amend the agenda at the beginning and say you'd prefer public comment at the time of the agenda item versus early in the meeting. Is that what you're asking?
No, I'm talking about to publish it that way.
To publish it that way.
I mean, because we have plenty of time to publish it to make sure the public knows that they can comment on this during the meeting, not at the beginning of the meeting.
Good. We certainly can, but I guess my confusion would be this. The agenda clearly provides the public and states it the opportunity to speak, to be heard on any agenda item. So for many, historically, they prefer to make it in the beginning and then leave, not hang out for hours if that's what it takes. But just to be clear what you're asking, the agenda states that public comment will be taken on all agenda items.
Yeah, and so that's why I think when I asked you about this is having it earlier, and if you're going to have the public comment so far separated from the actual item when it's discussed, then I think the item needs to be moved up maybe to item number 2 right after the general the general comment, so it's heard shortly after the public comment for that item.
So Councilmember Neese, the cleanest way to do that would be to amend the agenda. Why, though I'm not going to pretend to say I've always followed this rule, but your policy says that public hearings come first.
The ordinance or the
Yes.
policy? The ordinance.
Well, city code
City code.
identifies public hearings as first, but you can amend the agenda. So that agenda that evening could be amended to move it up the agenda if you want to take that action earlier.
Can we amend the agenda? Can we direct the staff to amend the agenda tonight on a work session?
Yes, please.
Councilmember Neese, I think my thought is this, that council can certainly amend the agenda on the night of the meeting to add the opportunity for public comment at the time that that agenda item is heard. I don't think that would require council to direct staff to republish the agenda. Republishing the agenda would be necessary if council wanted it to be a public hearing. It's not a public hearing, and that's not required. And at this point, we could not have a public hearing, technically what a public hearing is, because that requires 2 legal ads for 2 consecutive weeks. But council can certainly amend the agenda to add the opportunity for public comment following the agenda item like you would for a public hearing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess my question was, because the whole idea for having these discussions with these agendas coming to us is to be able to make changes to the agenda before they're published. And so in this case, I'm thinking that this needs to be moved up into the agenda if we're not going to have the public comment close to it. And have it published that way so the public is aware when the item's going to be talked about, and then, it were decided upon, and when they can actually make a public comment, and it's so that's closer in relation. So can we, as a body, direct staff tonight to move the item 5 up to the second position, since we're not going to move the public hearing?
Councilmember Neese, I think that you could, but that is contradictory to city code. Your city code requires public hearings to be first. So you can do that, and you can require staff to rework the agenda and republish it. It's just my opinion that is not necessary. And
well, I think if anyone is looking at the agenda and they see the item is going to be number 5, they're going to say, well, I'm not going to come to the meeting until, an hour and a half into the meeting. And when they show up and we've moved it ahead, then they're too late. And so I think we need to make sure that the agenda we present on items are accurate, pretty close to accurate, it's in that. So I guess I would make a motion to move it, item number 5 up to number 2, since we're not going to advertise an actual public comment on item number 5.
City Attorney has said that that's
staff to do
okay.
that.
There is a motion. Is there a second on the motion? For Councilmember Neese or for Gina? Okay. We'll hold off on whether there's a second while the question is asked.
So if we did that, what would it take and what would it cost? Is there what happens if you want to change it now?
if you want to amend the agenda and move it up to agenda item number 2, it's just staff resources. It just takes the clerk's office time. I don't know how many hours it takes them to do those kinds of things. It just takes them additional resources is all. But I do want to note that your city code does require public hearings to be first. So I would advise council to follow your order of business requirements under city code.
Okay. Is there a second to the motion? The motion dies for lack of a second. I think that resolves that issue, but I will be sure to remind anybody who's in the audience that the time to comment on that is at the beginning of the meeting. And so remind me if I don't on that, if you would. Councilmember Kennedy? Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember, so we'll go to council discussion. I think we're done with that, so Councilmember Kenny.
Mr. Mayor, just some guidance from you. I met with the Off the Streets group today. They would like to present. I have recommended they come and present at one of our work sessions, and that we would invite the county commissioners so they can give us their full rundown of what they plan on doing. We've had different people come here and talk about low barrier shelters. We've had different people come in and say, city, you must do this. After speaking with them today, I think it's their presentation and exactly what they're planning on doing and how it cooperates with the other entities in that neighborhood. I think I would ask them, how do we ask them to come and present at one of our work sessions?
Okay, Chris, you heard that suggestion. The idea when we could get something like that on our next work session, and I'll raise the larger question, which is Off the Street represents at this point, I think, 12 people. And there's a much larger issue about sheltering going into the winter that's been raised here. The rescue mission, I'd like to know what their status is as well. So I don't want to overwhelm, but I'm afraid that if we hear from just one relatively small part of that puzzle, maybe would be leaving some other questions unanswered.
You know, anybody can come and talk about what they are going to do. I think Off the Streets have a plan, and we've heard they want to come in and present their plan to the council so everybody knows what they're doing. I understand that there's other entities out there and what they're going to do for winter or whatever. My recommendation would be to ask them to come when we get into the new city hall. And so we have enough room to have the commissioners there and be able to do a presentation. And they were agreeable in a January timeline.
Okay, that gives more time, but it doesn't necessarily solve the sheltering issue. But so Off the Streets would be priority, but also maybe some of the other organizations could be invited.
Mayor, tomorrow, Lisa Harmon across the street is having a shelter meeting, and all of you folks are invited to it.
Yeah, and the continuum of care also would probably want to weigh in, especially if it involved any sort of commitment of city resources, I suppose. Chris, you've been involved with some of these issues?
Your December 2nd work session agenda is from projections into the future is fairly empty at this point. The question would be, so December 2 is a potential date. If you'd rather wait until January when we're in the new city hall, we can certainly do that. Ultimately, or to some extent, clarity on what the expectation of what you want staff to do, or you want to put these items on the agenda and let Off the Street speak and the others relative to us not doing a bunch of pre-work for you?
Actually, Chris, there would be no pre-work. We would just put them on and they will come and do their presentation.
That's up to you guys. As far as the agenda goes, December 2, there's availability in your work session. If you want to say who you want invited, we could write an email to them.
And we would like to have the county commissioners invited because it also involves them and the funding that they put in to the crisis center.
Okay, Councilmember Boyd, I'm not disagreeing at all with Councilmember Kennedy's conclusion that it doesn't involve much work. But I do think you'll need to frame for them what it is we're asking, and that is, at least in my mind, what does the sheltering situation look like for this winter? Councilmember Boyd?
And my thought is, let's go one step further. If we're going to talk about shelters, let's have everybody, all the pertinent players show up and tell us what they're going to do. I don't think the staff needs to do anything other than just, we just want to listen to everybody, Is MRM ready for the winter? Is whoever ready?
Yeah,
The
just
more
somebody needs
information, the
to
better.
extend the invitation and make sure they've been contacted, and that would fall to staff. Chris, it looks like you had a little.
Just trying to
thought path there.
structure things for you, just an awareness. Again, as you look out at those future agendas, we do have Cody Christensen penciled in for November 18th to provide a Yellowstone County Continuum of Care update. So
That would be great. The whole idea of this is not to talk about this winter and shelter care. It's for them to tell us what their plan is, how they plan on, where they plan on setting up, and what their future plan is. They're about 2 years out of getting anything. It's not to talk about what we're going to do this winter. We do, the continuum of care is talking about it. Pastor Harmon is talking about it. There's Rescue Mission is talking about it. That's a whole different subject. They just want to come and present what they're planning and why they're going forward.
Thank you for that clarification, because I was not understanding that.
Sure, and why it's important is, it's very important for folks, and Ed should be, and Kendra should be very interested, because it will affect right in the south side in Ward 1.
Okay, so did you say there was a November 18 continuum of care?
yes, what we have tentatively scheduled for November the 18th is Continuum of Care, Cody Christensen, Crisis Response Unit, Strategic Follow-Up Discussion, and Community Development Discussion. So, and then when we get to that next work session, December 2, that one's pretty much wide open. I would package the similar topics up the same evening, whether it's on the 18th if they're available, or December 2nd.
Okay, I just heard December 2nd, but this is already on November 18th, so.
So what I'll just do, I mean, it would seem to me that continuum of care conversation would be most pertinent the same night that you're talking about or hearing from some of these others. So unless Mr. Christensen is not available for the December 2 and would like to stay on the November 18th, my suggestion to him would be to bump to December 2, unless the others can move into that 18th here. So either way, we'll look at the 18th and the 2nd, see who's best available to give you updates, not anticipating staff analysis, just they're giving you a verbal update on where they're at.
Okay, all right, very good, thank you. Any other items of council discussion? Okay, thank you. We've had some, one or two people have been sitting out there patiently. So let's open for public comment on items not on our agenda tonight. Ming? Sorry to keep you.
Well, that's okay. Thank you for hearing me out. I'm speaking as a member of the Billings Heights Water Board tonight. I live at 1734 Poly Drive. I understand there's a lot of people that don't like me in this room, but as many volunteer hours I put out there, hear me out, what we're looking at. We're looking at the Heights Water Board, what they call a consolidation. It voted tonight to go ahead and authorize $100,000 on the Heights side to look at this consolidation study, which really is, and when I look at it, is a takeover of the Billings Heights water. The assessed value of the Heights water is over $20 million. The assessed value, if you really look at the appraisal, it's $100 million. However, when it come down to the $100,000 to put up the Heights fee, which was 50% put up by the city, it's unfair as far as I'm concerned. We had 9 members there, or 7 members of public comment there that did not want to pay the $100,000 fee. But there was only 2 of us that were able to say, you know what, public comment should be heard. And I know to the advantage of the city, you're going to get $100 million business is what you're going to get, and we're going to throw you a key if things work out to your consolidation. I just want you to hear me out. It's not for comment, but from what I did and how many hours I put into the volunteer work out there, you would be surprised what I have to do to look at how many people really want to be part of this city. And in the Heights, a lot of people are in the county, a lot. And I would say 23% is what we're looking at this point. So even if we do this consolidation study come June 25th when it's done, at that point, we still have to go to the board or to the ratepayers, and there's a chance, more than likely, that they're not going to pass it. So I'm just asking you guys, as a city, it's a great thing for you to do, but really, we at the people in the Heights that are part of the city, we're not seeing the same feels that people are. I know I'm in the minority. I'm walking into the Lions Den talking to you guys because you're going to get $4 million every year from the water and regulations that you can put on the water in the city. But we've been able to do this for 60 years. And when I was elected on that board 4 years ago as president and vice chair, I was for consolidation of the city. But I'm not seeing it anymore. I'm sorry. I'm just not seeing the advantage it is for the people in the Heights. And I just want you to be aware of that. That's all my public comment at this point. Yeah, we passed it. Yeah, I objected. So did most of the public all the public that was there objected to it. So just want to know FYI. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you for the information. We don't bite. Well, usually, sometimes. Okay, very good. Any other public comment? Don't see any. So thanks, everybody. We are adjourned.